Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the City Council meeting for May the 29th, 2023. Individuals who are interested in participating in this meeting were able to register online using the delegation registration form at www.kitchener.ca/delegation or via email at delegation@kitchener.ca. Any written comments received prior to the meeting have been circulated to members of Council and will form part of the official public record. The meeting live stream and archived videos of City Council meetings are available at www.kitchener.ca/watchnow. I'd now like to begin this evening's meeting, as we always do, by acknowledging that this evening we're gathering on the traditional territory of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee peoples. We recognize our responsibility to serve as stewards for the land and honor the original caretakers who came before us. Our community is enriched by the enduring knowledge and deep-rooted traditions of the diverse First Nations, Métis, and Inuit in Kitchener today. On motion by Councillor Schneider, the minutes of the regular meeting held May 8, 2023, and special meetings held May 8th and 15th, 2023, as mailed to the Mayor and Councillors were accepted. Thank you. And apologies. I would now like to ask those who are able to stand and join in the singing of O Canada. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest in today's agenda? I don't see any, so I just have one. I have a pecuniary conflict of interest under item 7.3.A, 1157 and 1175 Weaver Street East, as my residence is in the circulation area of that application. With that, we'll move on to presentations, and we have a presentation for the Smart Cities Connect Smart 50 Award, and that's with respect to the Growing Together submission. And Mr. Murray, welcome.
Good evening, Mayor Vrbanovic and members of Council. I'm very excited to share with you this evening, present an award that the City recently received from Smart Cities Connect. Smart Cities Connect is I'll move my glasses here. It's a premier North American Smart Cities focused organization. Their Smart 50 awards are provided to the top 50 Smart Cities projects from around the world each year and are presented at an awards gala at their annual conference. The City has been awarded a Smart 50 award for each of the past 4 years for various projects that we submitted. Travel restrictions from COVID had kept us from attending in 2021 and 2022. However, this year, I was honored to attend the Smart Cities Connect conference in Denver, Colorado, and the awards gala along with Justin Reedman to represent the City and receive the award for the project the City submitted entitled Growing Together. This year, Smart Cities Connect decided to identify and honor the top 3 Smart Cities projects of the Smart 50 awardees. We were thrilled when the City of Kitchener was the first top 3 project named. The Master of Ceremonies at the gala described the Growing Together project as the Smart City project that had it all: collaboration, engagement, use of our innovation lab, and the application of emerging technology. The following day, I was told there were 1,100 projects that were submitted for the Smart 50 award. So it's quite considerable that we were top 3 among 1,100 projects that were submitted for that. That's top-level recognition. It makes me very proud of the work that our staff are doing and the recognition we're receiving for it. The project submission for Growing Together was a collaboration between the city's planning and technology, innovation, and services divisions. I'm joined today by Adam Clark and Courtney Zinn from Planning and Digital Kitchener Innovation Lab, respectively, who have collaborated together to deliver on this project and prepared the project submission for the Smart 50 Awards. Through the Growing Together project, the Digital Kitchener Innovation Lab and city planning staff have developed an accurate 3D printed model of key areas of the city and generic representations of buildings of specific sizes and realistic styles. Through hands-on workshops, the community can engage with the 3D model to develop scenarios for growth. Those scenarios are then translated into the digital model and enabling a wealth of information and metrics to be generated, including density, housing, number of people, jobs, green space, and more, effectively translating the community vision into a quantifiable impact. The project is also exploring how emerging technologies can further complement this work. A prototype has been created of an augmented reality application to blend the physical and digital worlds. Through the app, users can visualize the digital 3D models in the context of the 3D printed model through a phone or tablet to create an understanding of how new proposals may fit into an existing area. The project continues to explore how technologies can support the city in tackling complex and challenging issues like housing and urban growth and create opportunities for community engagement and data-informed outcomes. We'd now be honored to present both the Smart 50 Award and the Top 3 Award Certificate to Mayor Vrbanovic on behalf of Council.
Dan, Courtney, Adam, and Garrett, congratulations to the team. I know there was also many other people that were involved, so please pass on our thanks and congratulations to everyone who's been part of this project. I know Council has had the opportunity to participate in the process during one of our strategic sessions, as well as some of us have joined you for some of the public sessions, and it's been great to see how the community has been engaging actively in the process and sort of developing a vision for how they would like to see things develop going forward. So well done. Congratulations. We'll now move into delegations, and I'd like to remind all delegations of some guidelines required for participation. If you conduct yourself in any of the following manners, it will result in an immediate removal from the meeting: interrupting the mayor or councillors, staff, or other delegations, derogatory statements about the mayor or councillors, staff, or others, and any hate speech or defamatory comments. One last reminder for delegations, please do not take offense if following your presentation there are no questions from Council. This is Council's time to really listen and reflect upon the opinions and ideas shared with us from our community members. The first item on this evening's agenda is Strategic Plan 2019-2022 with the Compass Kitchener report card, and I'd like to welcome Judy Stevens-Wells and Troy Glover from our Compass Kitchener Advisory Committee. Welcome, Judy, and welcome, Troy. It's great to have you both back.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Verbanovich and members of Council. It's a pleasure to be here again this evening. As you all know, Compass Kitchener is a committee of citizen volunteers appointed by and reporting directly to City Council. The roles and responsibilities assigned to our committee all focus on assisting with the development of the city's strategic plan, and then evaluating implementation of the strategic plan and reporting back to Council on the results of that evaluation. Compass Kitchener is currently comprised of 11 citizens, 9 of whom were able to participate in this recent evaluation process. The 2 who were not available to do so have been marked with an asterisk. The committee is supported in its work by 2 members of city staff, and I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Angie Fritz-Walters and Linda Carabo for the amazing job they do in supporting Compass Kitchener in the work that we do. In terms of the evaluation approach, we take the viewpoint of interested citizens and considered timing, impact, accountability, and budget in undertaking this evaluation. And answering the following questions guided the evaluation. Timing, were the strategic actions completed in the expected time frame? Impact, how did the strategic actions deliver on anticipated or desired impacts? How did progress on or completion of strategic actions make a difference to the city or to citizens? Accountability, were progress reports relevant, timely, and publicly profiled? How well was the public engaged? And budget, were the strategic actions completed on or within budget? Of those 4 elements, the middle 2, impact and accountability, are really the heart of the matter. Compass Kitchener developed a specific citizen impact criteria for each strategic action and consulted with Kitchener's corporate leadership team as it did so. Our pre-circulated written report provides a lot more detailed information, but given the time available this evening, we can only touch on some key highlights. Our first report card regarding the 2019 to 2022 strategic plan was presented to Council in December of 2021. In it, we evaluated 12 completed projects and provided a number of recommendations. And as you can see in the slide, of those 12 that were evaluated, 6 exceeded our expectations and the other 6 met our expectations.
This year, Compass Kitchener has undertaken a review of 5 projects completed in 2022. The Energy Efficient Reserve Fund, the Sustainable Urban Forest Strategy, the Waste Diversion Strategy, Huron Community Centre, and communication of service levels. Unfortunately, one completed project, the Customer Experience Review Program, was not included in either of our 2021 or 2022 report cards. The program was completed in 2021 after we finished our 2021 evaluation process. Its exclusion from the 2022 report card was an unintended oversight. Rest assured, it will be reviewed during our next round of project evaluations. Given time constraints, I will just touch on highlights of each assessment. Performance on the Energy Efficiency Reserve Fund met expectations. Compass Kitchener determined investments in energy savings projects are having a positive financial impact. Also, several projects came under budget, and there is a healthy balance for future investment. Performance on the Sustainable Urban Forest Strategy exceeded expectations. Compass Kitchener determined the strategy is comprehensive with its extensive public engagement in exemplary public education, partnership, and communication. Moreover, it set an ambitious yet achievable tree canopy goal, and it eliminated an existing backlog with the planting of over 2,600 trees. Performance on the city's waste diversion strategy did not meet expectations. While it established a welcome collaboration between the city and researchers at Wilfrid Laurier University, pilot results suggest the decision to discontinue the strategy is a good one. Compass Kitchener recommends that the city review and perhaps even renegotiate responsibilities for waste diversion between the region and itself, if possible. Performance related to Huron Community Centre exceeded expectations. Compass Kitchener deemed it a very successful strategic collaboration between partners. Its partnerships enabled more amenities to be included as a result of economies of scale. Huron Community Centre offers lessons that should be applied to future community centre builds in the city. And finally, performance related to setting and communicating service levels did not meet expectations. Compass Kitchener determined the city needs to proactively make service standards more public by sharing information on how service level performance is measured and reported, as well as providing scheduled updates. Nevertheless, highlights did include the city's focus on the top 5 most asked questions, which is a good starting point, and its effective communication and information sharing for services such as snow clearing and grass cutting.
So in terms of the broad strokes, I think the biggest message is that the level of productivity, despite COVID and the unanticipated disruption that it caused, the fact that it created absences due to illness, it caused temporary closures, it led to some staff layoffs, it led to redeployment of staff to other jobs, and it also led to the surfacing of some new priorities that had not existed prior to COVID. The fact that the city, despite those disruptions, was able to complete 17 of the projects, I think is really remarkable and really worthy of celebration. So we would highly commend the city's progress in that respect. And the other thing I would add as a note is that the 2 projects that did not meet our expectations were clearly both projects that were significantly impacted by COVID, either because it reduced the scope of the project or it led to redeployment of a small team of staff members that held responsibility for the project. So I think that the city staff should take great pride in what they've accomplished through that 4-year time period. In the course of our following the public engagement processes that the city has created, as well as our review of completed projects, there are often areas that are identified that would benefit from further attention. And the 8 key areas that we've identified are housing affordability, public engagement, continuation of work on the 8 delayed or deferred strategic plan projects, some website improvements, tracking project budgets and expenses, continued work on localizing the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, the benefit of building a degree of adaptability into future strategic plans, and focusing on provision of information in 3 key areas: data, the setting of meaningful outcomes, and providing contextual information to the public. So in terms of our conclusions, there are 3 key points we'd like to stress. The first, going back to acknowledging and celebrating the accomplishments over the past 4 years. We really applaud the 17 completed projects, and the fact that 15 of the 17 have exceeded or met expectations is outstanding. The second point relates to the strategic plan currently under development. Given the pace of change and unpredictable elements encountered today, it would be really beneficial to build a degree of adaptability into this and future strategic plans. As was so well captured at an early resident panel meeting, it's important to set a clear course of priorities and outcomes expected, but also build in the capacity to swerve in our lane, which was a great phrase someone came up with in that process, as needed in order to achieve the most meaningful and impactful results for the city using the resources available. And the third message relates to stressing how important it is for the city to focus on 3 kinds of information. The first is data. There'd be a real benefit to tracking more data in specified areas, which can then be used to both guide decision-making and inform evaluation of initiatives undertaken. The second is setting and sharing meaningful outcomes at the outset of projects, not just timelines and budgets, but meaningful outcomes addressing the intended citizen or city impact of an initiative. And the third is providing more contextual information and doing it simply and succinctly. Many issues that face Kitchener today are complex, and their resolution involves participation by multiple levels of government. Citizens need clear information outlining who's responsible for what in order to truly understand where the city can take effective action and where responsibility lies with other levels of government. When given the necessary background information, citizens are better equipped to focus their input on areas in which the city can actively contribute to solving the given problem. The other aspect of contextual information that's of key importance is the city's active promotion of public awareness regarding the full spectrum of city actions and decisions undertaken in a specific domain, so that individual projects are seen within that broader context. Media coverage often tends to focus in on a narrow range of more contentious issues, but doesn't necessarily provide the full picture or range of city initiatives in a given sphere. Development is a great example. We hear in the news about a selection of projects that have attracted attention, but not necessarily about the full spectrum of development projects approved. And we feel there's a real benefit to helping citizens see individual development projects in the context of the full spectrum of developments that are underway. And that ends our report for this evening. We're happy to try to answer any questions that you might have.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much to both of you, Judy and Troy, and thank you to the committee for all of your work throughout the year and in conducting this report card. Something I know you've heard me say before is one of the things that I think is a real strength of our city's strategic planning process is the existence of the Compass Kitchener Committee and the work that you and those that came before you have done for, I think almost 20 years now. In evaluating how the Council of the Day is doing in terms of meeting the strategic objectives, as well as providing meaningful input that can guide both Council and staff in the work that needs to be done going forward. We do have some questions for you, and I will start with Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor Urbanovic, and thank you, Judy and Troy, for coming in. I always really enjoy your reports, and something that I found that was a thread that went throughout your report was, talking about getting that contextual information out to the public, and I think that's something that we always struggle with. We have a lot of big projects that we're working on, but what does that mean to people in their daily lives and as they drive around the city and as they access our services, etc. So, you had mentioned things where we had some challenges on messaging around snow clearing and grass cutting. Absolutely, and those are things that we struggle with yearly. So I'm wondering if you have some more ideas maybe around how we do get that information out. I know I struggle as a councillor. I put it out on my social media, etc., and have calls with people, but how do we do a better job at that?
I would say the most resounding comment I've heard around the Compass table is the importance of using a variety of media and strategies. Clearly the website and the internet and social media are great vehicles and reach lots of people, but not all our population is connected to electronic media. And so working through conventional media, through radio, through newspapers, through community centers and the information that they share with neighborhoods, working with neighborhood associations, it's a huge task, and we recognize how complex it is. There's a lot of information to share, but I don't think there's a single focused vehicle that's going to achieve that for us. It's a multi-armed task.
Yeah, I agree, Judy. I mean, we try and do our best through a number of different vehicles, but it really is the most important thing I feel like we can do is to share what we're trying to do, but to also have that feedback from people about what we're trying to do and how we can be doing it better. So thank you so much for this report.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Deneau.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for your report. I just have a question on the improvements page. I think you had, 10, 11 different areas for improvement. Is that what it was? Something like that? So for each recommended improvement, are there specific recommendations for each of those that you'll pass on to either council or to staff?
I think we've shared as many specific comments within each of the evaluations as we thought would be useful. Our recommendations at the end are broader and are not focused necessarily project by project. Okay. So Compass is an interesting committee because what we share with you really only reflects the consensus of committee discussion. And so there's only a certain level of detail we can get into given the time constraints of the work that we have. So we've kind of given you as much detail as we can.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for the report. In the slide that you showed showing areas to pay attention to, there are two items that stand out for me. One is public engagement and the other is affordable housing. So I guess we hear from a lot of residents, and I seem to recall the last report you presented to us. Community engagement was a big concern of yours. Do you see any change in the way it's conducted, or, because I still hear complaints, right?
Certainly, there has been improvement, I think, and we're seeing more and more effectively conducted consultations and requests for public input. What we tend to hear the most is the importance of ensuring that communications following a public engagement process convey the breadth of ideas that have been shared in that process, so that those who have participated know they have been heard and understood. Clearly, not everyone is going to get exactly what they're looking for coming out of those input processes. But what people need to understand is, A, what was heard, what the spectrum of input looked like, and what led the actual decision-making in the end. And I think that's really key. I think the other piece, it ties into the information sharing and public education. I think in a number of areas, the public are unclear as to who holds responsibility. For example, with respect to affordable housing, there are a variety of levels of government involved. Not everyone understands who does what. It's really important that A, that's made clear at the beginning of the process, and that therefore people can understand in the decisions that are made that those decisions were the things that fell within the city's domain to influence.
Okay, just drawing on the affordable housing topic again, because this again comes up over and over again. I don't know if you have suggestions on what the city should be doing to contribute more to the affordable housing crisis we have in the region and in the city.
I think what we've seen happening through the term of this report has been really impressive. Our experience as Compass was that previously, previous councils had not necessarily felt that affordable housing was front and center on their agenda. Clearly, Council has taken that issue very seriously this time, and I think that the advisory group that was struck brought lived experience to the table and brought a number of the housing providers to the table who have had really good advice. I think people are really struggling to see more work like the city has done in providing land for a project that has created supportive housing units, which has been really important. That's something the city can do. speeding up the review of applications for affordable and supportive housing projects is key. I think there, as are noted in the report, there are some concerns about how inclusionary zoning will play out in terms of integrating affordable housing in some projects where it may not be a perfect fit, and we're hoping that that's something the city can do some work on, to see whether alternative contributions can be made to develop housing on sites that would be more supportive for the residents who need it.
And of course, I would add the definition of affordability is crucial. Okay, thank you.
Okay, that appears to be all the questions. So again, thank you very much for coming in, for all of your diligent work, and look forward to the next report in the future.
Thank you.
And in the meantime, a strategic plan that'll come forward in a little while as well.
Thank you very
Wonderful.
much.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, I don't believe there's a motion, but should we maybe look to you or to staff? Should we take a motion to receive this so that it's formalized? Sorry? Okay. Then we'll just leave it at that. Thank you. We'll now move on then to item 6.2, development of Kitchener's manufacturing sector. And we have one delegation, Matthew Griffin. Welcome, Mr. Griffin. I just want to remind all delegations that they have 5 minutes to make their presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The reason I'm here tonight is because I'm here tonight as a concerned citizen. I feel like it's important that I should explain myself and my backstory before I go into why I believe expanding manufacturing in Kitchener is so important. For the last 15 years, I've only been able to find work in Cambridge. And for a long time, I didn't really think much about it because not only was it not that long of a commute, I could get there very easily and that sort of thing, but also on top of that, a lot of the people that I worked with were not from Cambridge. They had to commute from somewhere else. They had to commute from other cities, and that's something that became kind of confusing to me because I was wondering, why do companies in Cambridge not hire people from Cambridge? And once we got to the pandemic, and when I lost my job during that time and lost my car during that time, I became more aware of the developments that were going on in Kitchener because, especially within the last couple of years, I noticed that a lot of the developments for the City of Kitchener that has been approved by the City Council has been for residential apartment buildings and high-rises. And every time I see this in the news, I always think to myself, where are the people who are going to be living in these places going to be working? Because at the same time, I also see a lot of headlines that say that there's a lot of manufacturing being developed in Cambridge. And I think to myself, why is that not happening here? Especially for people like myself who really need to find jobs closer to home, especially these days for two main reasons. Because of inflation, because of the soaring costs of stuff, it's harder to be able to get to where we need to go. And as someone who has had to take the bus over the last couple of years, it's not only longer to get to where I need to go, but it's also more inconvenient. But I know that the buses are a regional thing, but it really made me more worried about wanting to try and find a job closer to home. And fortunately, I have found work, but it is still in Cambridge. But on top of that, there's also the environmental concern. There's the environmental concern because we have, everyone says we should be reducing greenhouse gases, we should be reducing our carbon footprints, but that's not happening because more and more people are having to commute out of the city in order to get to the jobs. Like I said, at all the places I've worked in Cambridge, I've known very few people who actually live there. They all had to commute from somewhere else, and so that's very inconvenient for them, not only for the inflation, but also for the environment. And then I think to myself, why have we not taken more actions to improve the manufacturing sector here? Because if we really are concerned about reducing our carbon footprint, about encouraging growth here in the city, we can't just build high-rises all the time. There has to be a place for people to work. And it's very hard for people like myself to find those kinds of jobs. And so something I was going to point out as well is the wasted taxpayer dollars that have been used because obviously as more people have to leave the city, obviously they've had to expand Highway 8, they've had to expand the 401, and of course there's that sign on the road to Cambridge that tells you how much the current expansion for the 401 is currently costing, at over $90 million. But with the inflation that's been going on, that's easily now over $100 million. And that's not taking into consideration the expansion going on the westbound 401, or the expansion that's already happened, or the expansion that's already happened on Highway 8. So that's lots of taxpayer dollars that could have been used much more fruitfully, but instead has been used to expand two roads that should have never needed to expanded if our own city council had made a greater effort to make sure that there were plenty of jobs for everyone here in their own hometown. So that's my primary concern here as a concerned citizen. We want to work in our hometown. We should not have to be forced to commute to Cambridge or other places. I get job recommendations before I got the job I currently want for jobs in Ayr, Woodstock, Brantford, Hamilton, Stratford, Toronto. And obviously that's not sustainable because the moment I move where I currently am, my rent will automatically double at minimum. So I'm stuck here. I have to live here because I have no choice for financial reasons. So it would be far better for me to be able to work in my hometown. And I know I'm not alone in saying that. So it's all in your court now. I would have made a joke here, but obviously I don't have the time to do that. But it's imperative that this city council take greater strides into ensuring that jobs are not just for the tech sector in Kitchener, that there should be enough opportunities for everyone. Thank you.
Great. Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, there's no clapping permitted in the council chamber. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Griffin, for coming in this evening. There don't appear to be any questions.
Of course.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time, Mayor. I appreciate it.
Okay, moving on then to item 6.3, official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment pertaining to 528 to 550 Lancaster Street West and 26 Bridge Street West. And I'll note that we've had 3 written submissions, one from Bobby Stewart, one from Maria Trushan-Tatarin, and one from Tiffany Balork. And we have several delegations this evening, and our first delegation is Mr. Stephen Litt from Vive Development and Pierre Chauvin from MHBC Planning. Welcome, Mr. Chauvin. Mr. Litt.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Pierre Chauvin with MHBC Planning. At the last planning committee on May 8th, the committee requested that we go back and consider a number of community benefits. We have provided a letter to staff that I believe has been provided to you that summarized a number of different options for community benefits. And I'll let Mr. Litt speak to some of those and some of the sort of other changes that have transpired since that submission. And we'll be here to answer any questions that council may have with respect to those options.
Mr. Litt, welcome.
Good evening. Thanks for having us again. So we took what we heard from committee back and tabled a number of different options, which I hope council has an opportunity to review. Just going to review our preferred option, which we think balances the expectation of housing, amenities in the neighborhood, and all the other wonderful things that we need to balance through our daily life in Kitchener. So we are proposing the following: to remove and commemorate the 2 homes at 550 Lancaster. In lieu of some of the heritage things discussed, we would like to make a cash contribution to a local park amenity in the neighborhood of Bridgeport at the building permit issuance of the next tower of $200,000. In addition to that, we would like to contribute $200,000 to the Working Center and the amazing things they do in our community for to the tune of $200K over 10 years, so $20,000 per year. We have reached out to our existing residents and neighbors and offered accommodation if suitable at 528 Lancaster at their existing rent for 5 years, and working with each individually and hope to come to terms and help help them move on in the next stage of their life. And the balance up to 13 units at 528 Lancaster, so the building that exists there today, we would like to keep 13 of those units, so 10% of it, at mid-market affordable rents. Confusing definition, as we all know. Being defined as a median, 30% of median renter household income in the city of Kitchener. And I'll go one step further, that number is approximately $1,425 today. So, as usual, I'm here for questions and discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. We do have some questions for you. Councillor Singh.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And, I think what you're presenting and the offers you're making, it's kind of a little reflective that you took stock, of what you're proposing and the changes that would be to the community, and I guess what positive benefits can be a part of your development. But that day, what we had heard from some other residents, or one particular, there was I think a tenant that was quite distraught, and at that point they weren't so sure if they had properly communicated with your company. And did further conversations happen, and what happened with that?
Yeah, she has actually agreed to move into 528 Lancaster with her daughter, June the 1st, which we think is wonderful news. So, yeah.
And she's satisfied with that resolution?
Seems to be, yes.
Okay.
And she may have submitted an email to staff.
Okay,
and
yeah,
council,
there was a forward recently, so I wasn't
Okay.
sure if it was related to that tenant.
That is her, yes.
That's fantastic. Okay, thank you very much.
No problem.
Thank you, Councillor Singh. Councillor O'Dooney.
Thank you, Mayor Barry. I just wanted to confirm again, all tenants, have you communicated with all of them? Because I remember last time the concern from some of them was they hadn't been communicated with.
Yeah, so phone calls were made, but since then, immediately after, we wrote letters and have continued to follow up. So, yes, we've made contact with all 6 tenants.
Okay. I do recall that one of the tenants had an issue where they have a studio in the property as well. Have you had a chance to discuss, because that is part of their livelihood, and if
Sure.
the apartment is a lot smaller, that might end up hindering their opportunity to continue down that path?
Yeah, we've offered apartments at a similar size to what they have. We haven't heard back from, I believe it's Alicia, on next steps and such. So we've reached out and tried to open the communication dialogue. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Thank you, Councillor O'Dooney. Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you. So what are the size of the apartments that are being lost, and what is the similar size that's being offered?
I want to say they're about 685 square feet.
Being offered, or
In the 2 homes, roughly speaking. They're kind of a mirror image of each other. So, yeah, the smallest unit at Lancaster would be roughly 600 square feet, and they go up to just under 950, I believe. So,
and are these studio apartments?
no studios. The smallest would be a 1-bedroom. Yeah.
Small 1-bedroom. And why would you not offer the same rent that they currently have in perpetuity? With, you could have annual rent increases, which are expected, but why would they stop or cease to be affordable in 5 years? And where would people go at that point?
I'm going to go with the human condition that we've sort of thought this was a reasonable ask that would give folks enough time to find accommodation elsewhere. Those rents, again, we're committing the 13 units to that 1425 number, and that's for 10 years through our CMHC relationship.
So 13 units at 1425 for
Correct.
20 years, and the people that are being displaced will have the same rent that they currently have for 5 years.
Yes, subject to normal increases they would receive in their current spot.
And can you tell us what the average rent in their current arrangement is?
I can run back and pull up the rent roll, but again, I don't think such information is sort of confidential with the tenant, so I don't want to share their rents, if that makes sense.
Okay, those are my questions.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson. Go ahead, Councillor Johnson.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I had a question. I was hurriedly trying to write this down. So there's a $200,000 contribution to parks, is that correct? And is that an upfront?
Correct, yeah.
Contribution?
Yeah, a building permit for the next tower.
Okay, so that would happen right away. There's no stall on that then?
We plan on going through the site plan process and billing as soon as we can go through the building permit and site plan, so.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Pedal to the metal.
Sorry?
Pedal to the metal, sorry.
Okay, and then you had mentioned as well a $200,000 donation to the Working Center, and that would be over 10 years.
Correct.
Is there a way of doing that right away?
Yeah, I suppose we could make that initial installment now. I mean, the idea is as the income of the project, you know, again, over time, it's easier to absorb such a cost than project financing. So it's not a condominium project. I mean, condominium, they have much more significant upfront revenue from purchaser deposits. We don't collect revenue until a lease is signed and someone moves in. So it's a delayed revenue. So I do believe the $200K cash and the $200K over 10 years is a reasonable one for our business model.
So I'm sorry, I wasn't quite clear. So would that be right away, or is that?
I would, proposing over 10 years, so $20,000 per year for 10 years.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Singh, you had a follow-up question?
Yeah, I think that's probably what you were asking for clarity, that
Sure.
the first installment of, I guess, 20,000 I'm assuming would be at the building permit stage, similar to the 200,000, and that would be then over the 10 years. Is that correct?
Sure, yes.
Okay, all right. I think that's what you wanted clarity on, right? 200, okay. Fair enough. The other thing, just so we're all clear what you're proposing, and this is substantive dollars. I mean, we haven't seen this type of contribution where, it's not necessarily asked and it's offered through your own acknowledgement. Is you're saying that you want a commemoration on site of the existing homes and then allow them to be demolished, or you're saying you would want to move them as well? I wasn't very clear.
Sorry, yeah, we're proposing them to be removed and demolished.
Removed and demolished and
when I say-
commemoration on site.
Yeah, commemoration would be our heritage consultant would put a plan together that staff would review as part of our site plan process, so.
Okay, all right, and that's helpful. And I guess I would have clarity of staff later of that. Thank you.
Okay. We'll have opportunities for questions of staff later. Thank you, Councillor Singh. Councillor Michaud.
Thank you. Sorry, I wasn't expecting the commemoration move of 2 homes to be demolished. I'm caught off guard with that. So what exactly, if you could walk me through the process as much as you know, would be done for the homes before you demolish them? I'm not quite.
Admittedly, I haven't been through one before. From my understanding, often there's Pierre can answer. I'll let the professional.
Typically, with these analyses, what will happen is there will be a review of the existing house, documentation of the existing houses, photographic working drawings as well, the layouts, that will be documented, and then there will be a plaque of some sort that depicts and provides a bit of history about the significance of these dwellings, and that would be placed somewhere on site, probably within the amenity space that we have on the site, and again, the wording of that plaque would be reviewed and approved by city heritage staff.
Okay, thank you. And has it been documented that these homes can't be moved? They wouldn't survive a move? Is that where you're at with this? Because I know we had conversation the last time that we talked about that. So.
Yeah, they can be moved at extreme costs, and we're proposing that a commemoration and documentation of the homes is more appropriate, and a cash payment, as described, is better suited for the community. We just think that that's parks, amenity space, and affordable housing the Working Center provides is of chief importance.
So the cost to move the homes would be $400,000?
The cost to move the homes was $650,000. To put it simply, yes.
So there's 250,000 kind of outstanding here that you're not
Yeah.
giving us.
There's also affordable housing, so comparing to what,
Oh, okay.
yeah, I don't want to get into specific numbers, but the totality of the offering, we would like to think is beyond what was offered before.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Clancy.
Yeah, I guess my hope going forward, do you think that this approach to your projects could be kind of a social norm or a norm to have that social responsibility woven into your projects?
For sure. I think all of our projects today have that, the rental component being, distilled to simple terms, rental is a need, home ownership is a desire and a want. So I think that there's that inherent component in all the rental projects we do. But to answer your question, yes, I think some compensation for parks, working with the existing residents, and contributions to affordable housing is the right way to go.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Mayor Urbanovic, and thank you, Mr. Litt and Mr. Chauvin for coming in. I just want a little more clarification on is it 200,000 you're going to be donating to parks?
Correct. That's the suggestion of a park in the neighborhood that is in need of improvement and further amenities.
Okay. Is that in writing that it's going to be in your neighborhood? You're going to figure that out later? Okay. Okay, we'll ask that.
Councillor Schneider.
Thank you, Mayor Urbanovic. Thanks again for coming in. Talking about the commemoration of the homes, could that involve, using the bricks, maybe some of the interior doors, things like that, windows, at some point, somewhere?
Yeah, just thinking back, we removed the non-original additions in the two homes in Queen Street, and part of those were preserved. Anyway, long story. The parts that were removed, yes, were offered. We put a Kijiji up ad when we salvaged, and we offered those bricks to neighbors that needed bricks for their similar aged homes. So, yeah, absolutely. Anything that can be, recycled and offered to the community will be.
Yeah, and you touched on it. I guess maybe for council's benefit and maybe for the public who might be watching, you're talking about the difference in revenue. So if this was a condominium, you would be getting that revenue up front. But since you're providing rental housing, the revenue doesn't come in as quickly. Maybe explain some of the challenges you have with that?
Yeah, without getting into specifics, simple number. So let's say a project costs $100. To build a condominium project, you would take purchaser deposits, and that would be 15% to build the project. You buy a bond. Then you put up another $5 or $10 of your own cash equity out of Gene's to build it. In rental housing, we generally need to put up $35 to $40 out of that 100 to build it. When a condominium closes, say easy numbers, 2 years after you build, you get the full value of the building, versus in our business, our revenue is rent collection. These buildings are just the way costs are structured and interest rates are today. These buildings don't get paid off for 40 to 50 years. So it's admittedly a very different business model, for lack of a better word, than condominium.
Okay, I think that helps provide some perspective with the financial contributions you're making for the community as well. Thank you.
There don't appear to be any other questions. I do just have one as a follow-up to the issue of the heritage elements and features. You indicated you might make them available to the other neighbors. I'm wondering if you've contemplated how you might be able to utilize some of them in the actual construction of your particular project. And while I recognize this isn't like the Canadian Chamber of Commerce in Toronto, but I look at, for example, how that historical facade was included around BCE Place in its construction. I look at how the part of the facade of Forsyth has been included in the project at Center Block. So is that something that you might take a look at and as part of the idea that you're bringing forward.
Yeah, I'm happy to task our interior designer to incorporate some of that interesting wood and brick into lobbies, common areas and such. It's a great idea.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, there don't appear to be any other questions.
Thank you.
Thanks. Our next delegation is Danny Lindemood from Water Watchers. I believe, no, not here? Okay, thank you. Then our next delegation is Kelly Zook.
Don't ask, it's not a good story.
Take your time. No worries. I've been in one of those. It's not fun. Welcome, Ms. Zook. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
It's Zook.
Zook, okay.
But everybody pronounces it
My
incorrectly, so
apologies.
that's all right. Okay. So, good evening, Mayor Vivranovic and other city councillors. Debbie Chapman, thank you very much for inviting me to come and speak on this issue today. The question I have to put before you this evening regarding the development on Lancaster, and might I add, I do not live in that area anymore, is when will we learn? I'm serious when I ask this question. When will we, as a species, learn that developing our green spaces is harmful to all living things? When will we listen to our scientists and stop listening to greed? How many times do we have to be told not to disturb endangered habitats? How many more species have to go extinct before we finally say no more? And it isn't only the environmental impact that is at risk here. It isn't only the river for which we rely on so heavily. It's about our community relationships. Did we not just start this meeting with a land acknowledgement? To my knowledge, no one consulted our Indigenous neighbours when planning this project. Why are we only paying them lip service? Do we not mean what we are espousing in the land acknowledgement or not? How on earth can we consider building on a pristine site without consulting them? This is an egregious oversight, which must be rectified before any decision is taken. Reconciliation depends on proper and consistent consultation and consent. These obligations cannot be treated frivolously. You must demand the developers engage in meaningful Indigenous consultation and constant process, and City of Kitchener should do the same. Another point, in this city we have so many abandoned lots. Think of the old McDonald's at Victoria and King just down the road from us here. How long has it been closed? We're finally developing the old Taco Bell property at Westbound in Victoria. How many years did that sit there lying fallow? It's hard to go anywhere in downtown Kitchener without seeing empty or abandoned buildings. The old Eaton Centre hasn't been productive since I moved to this city 25 years ago. We have so many beautiful new builds that have incorporated old houses and heritage buildings. The Revive project is one. There's more on Victoria and Charles area and Park Street. Why would we tear up a beautiful natural area and build condos for the wealthy when there are so many other sites to build upon? Yet we want to destroy and build on a gorgeous riverside ecosystem. These proposed units will be prime real estate overlooking the river. Many will want to live there for the view and will pay huge amounts to do so, not caring about the environmental and cultural impact their new home will cost the rest of us. They will also make this developer, who obviously, really, I'm sorry, doesn't care about the community, the things that he suggested about putting money back in the community, isn't worth what this is costing us. It's going to make him wealthy. So what is the cost here? Are we willing to sacrifice our green space and endanger the health of the Grand River so affluent people can get a nice view? Are we willing to endanger our relationship with our Indigenous neighbours to make a developer that doesn't even live in the area better off, more well off than they already are? And lastly, I just added this to my speech. The developers stated that they think the current tenants will be able to find other affordable housing in the next 5 years. Pardon me for saying this, but this is a laughable assumption. I will share my personal experience with renting. My rent for a 25-foot beautiful four-bedroom house in 2019 was $1,750. The landlord sold the property, so we were forced to move to a 1,500 square foot apartment, a three-bedroom home at $1,900. We lived there for 2 years, and unfortunately, that landlord sold the house as well. So we are now living in a tiny three-bedroom, 1,100 square foot property, paying $2,550. That's an increase of 34% over 4 years, every single time we have to move. So I asked these developers, where exactly are these tenants supposed to move in 5 years if you just have if you're only giving them a 5-year rental at the current amount with the current 4% or whatever the increase might be, 2.5 or whatever. So I have to ask you, all of you, when will we stop paving paradise? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Zook. There are some questions. Hang on, don't go upstairs yet.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay. Didn't want you to have to take more steps than...
No, it's all right. I've already got my 10,000 in, even with a broken leg.
That's impressive in the booth then. Councillor Chapman, you have some questions.
Yeah, thank you, Kelly, for coming in. You talk about the endangered species.
There aren't any on this particular site, not on this particular site. But we keep doing this, they become extradited. I mean, we finally got the wild turkeys back, right? You know, that was finally something that we reintroduced and has been successful, and that's been wonderful. But why did they go in the first place? Overhunting, no habitat.
I guess that my question to you would be, can you describe the natural aspects of the site to us?
Oh my goodness, it's along the Grand River. The Grand River has been my passion ever since I was 9 years old. I started working with, I'm originally from Elora. I started working with the Fergus Sewage Center because when it rained in Fergus, unfortunately, the sewage was pumped into the city raw when I was a child. So I helped the scientists at the time perform benthic research, basically just the bugs in the water, which bugs are there. If there's mosquitoes and such like that, the water's bad. If there's mayflies, dragonflies, and damselflies, the water's pretty good. And when that project was done, the brown trout was not reintroduced, but brown trout were introduced into the river to provide fishing and other recreational things. And so the Grand River has been something that I have been close to, living in the Elora Gorge area for quite some time. So we're talking about all different species of fish. I mean, there's the construction alone is going to cause so much dust, dirt. Every time it rains, it's all going to flood into the river. We're going to get more algal blooms. All these kinds of things the deer that are along there. I mean, I did just live there recently. I moved in July of last year. I used to live on Lang Crescent. And the deer in our backyard, the turkeys in our front yard, the possums, the groundhogs, everything. All of this stuff depends on the river and the ecosystem, the watershed, the Grand River watershed that we enjoy.
Just one last question. In the report, it says that 5 high-rises seen from the river creates visual interest. I just wondered what your response to that comment is.
I'm from Elora. We don't have anything more than 3 stories tall, so that's an unfair question to ask a village girl. I think, especially on the river, something that tall on the river is going to be an eyesore, personally. That's not my concern. But yeah, no, I'm not going to enjoy it for sure.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
There are several more people. Thank you, Councillor Chapman. Councillor Clancy.
Yes, lately it seems I meet someone who's been displaced on a very regular basis, but I think one part of it, I know we talk about the financial aspect, but I've found people speak that it's been quite difficult. Can you share a little bit about the emotional experience of being displaced twice in 5 years?
You're going to get me to cry.
Sorry.
It's quite frankly been horrific. moving a home of that size costs a minimum of $1,300, a minimum. And that's after calling around to find the best price that we could. So there's that aspect of it. The financial aspect surrounding a move, taking time off work to go look for a place, begging the new landlords to take you in when your income is rocky. I work with Extended Family Waterloo Region, which is an incredible organization, but unfortunately, the work itself doesn't pay that much. It's a work of love, not of money. We're only getting paid $20.52 an hour, and that's with no benefits, no vacation time, and no sick days. We basically get 6 hours of sick days with it. So that's not the fault of the extended family. Unfortunately, that's the way the government funds the work that I do. So my income hasn't changed. My rent has increased 34%. So, yes, and then the emotional aspects. Now, luckily, the last move, there were two ladies that are with the Family Home Project in Extended Family Waterloo Region. I don't know if you know about that, but we take people who have developmental disabilities, cognitive challenges, autism, and Down syndrome into our homes. So there's two ladies I've been working with, and they're very famous, Anna and Maria Wyprock. They're absolutely lovely. They're autistic twins. They're 69 years old. And at the same time we lost our second home to come to the one that we're in now, they also found themselves homeless. Their current family home provider moved out of province. We were lucky enough to be able to get approval for them, and we're all living together. So that's one of the things that has offset our rent, is that we've taken in, that we're taking care of these two ladies full-time, and they're like children. They can be left alone in the home for a few hours, but not very long. But yes, so we've taken on that additional. So it's wonderful and it's lovely, but as you asking about stress, there's more stress.
I just feel like I'm thank you because it's important for those who haven't experienced displacement to understand how that is on somebody's life. Thank you for sharing.
Councillor Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and welcome as well. It's good to get your perspectives.
Thank you.
It's good for us to hear from all sides, right? And so you said you lived in the neighborhood before?
Yes, I lived there for 2 years.
Okay, so you don't live there? And then
No, but they sold the house out from under. They were lovely. Both landlords, both times were lovely. But they have their own lives and they had their own needs. And so we had to move both times.
And you said you were invited by Councillor Chapman to delegate today?
I wrote her a form letter, and she wrote me back and invited me to speak. So then I looked at it a little bit more, and I decided to come and speak.
Okay, all right. And you said it's been a challenge for you when you had to move. Just couldn't find anything.
Nightmare.
And
An
the costs
absolute.
have
I had two property managers looking for me. And the thing is, when we did invite the ladies to live with us, there's mobility challenges. So a lot of the places that we were looking at were difficult stairs-wise. And the other thing was, too, when you're looking at a property manager, they're only looking at your bottom line and how much money you're making.
Right.
They don't look at how you pinch your pennies and how you get by. I mean, my husband's cell phone is 8 years old. So, you know, we do our best that way. So we were lucky all 3 times to be able to rent privately from people that were willing to take a chance on us. And we've had lovely letters of recommendation from our previous landlords that also helped us squeeze in.
I'm just happy that you were able to find accommodation, especially in this market right now. That seems to be a very challenging environment. There are many that wish there were more affordable housing units out there, that they could find accommodation aside from the affordable rents or not, and any rent. And that's what we're hearing for, you know, as our population goes up and there's more that are coming from outside the region into Kitchener. And so I ask this for the question, not because I'm challenging you, so please understand. I'm trying to get all considerations here. The development before us is a rental housing development. the proposal, aside from the neighborhood community benefit that the developer may be proposing to the working center, they're also allocating 13 units that would be affordable, as deemed affordable through CMHC, so there's no argument there. And they're planning on keeping those units affordable over the next 10 years as well. So aside
Over the
from
next 10 years.
yeah, but aside from the 13 units, which is more than what's on site right now, this development's creating rental units. So when you say affluent people, wealthy people, you share, you're as a renter.
It's a
not,
riverside property. Sorry.
Can we, Councillor Singh, if you can get to your question, if you can hold off in responding until Councillor Singh is done.
So do you think there's a benefit of having more rental units?
Absolutely. There's a low-income housing project going up right now at the end of the street that I currently live on. I fully support that. It's 6 floors. It's great. It was on a piece of land that has laid fallow.
Okay.
There are dozens of land in this city that nothing is happening on. Why are we digging up the riverside?
Well, it's not the riverside, but I'm just trying to get at the supply issue, right? Having as many rental units come on stream, because not every one of them can be affordable, and you need a mix of rental housing units. Do you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. But again, it's more the environmental impact that it was the rental thing only came up. I didn't have that in my speech when I came here. Okay. That just came up afterwards. So
okay. Maybe you didn't know that part, but that helps us to understand.
Yes.
You're for rental housing, but you have concern regarding its riverfront development.
The location is the big problem.
Okay.
And yes, I'm sorry, but people that will pay big money for Riverside, I know that because my in-laws were 2 of them paying what they lived behind the Pioneer Tower.
Right.
And they paid big money to have that Riverside.
Challenge is not all renters are affluent, but I understand.
No, I know that.
Thank you.
Believe me, I know that.
Appreciate it. I just wanted to make sure we clarified
yes.
Folks, I don't want to get it, and I'm going to say this to everyone. Questions, answers, we're not debating until later on. Thank you. Thank you. Those are all the questions that we have of you.
Thank you
very much. Next delegation is Alicia Mohammed. Welcome, Ms. Mohammed.
Thank you, Barry, and thank you, councillors, for your time, and everyone here tonight, and everyone watching at home. First, I want to welcome questions after my presentation as well. Feel free to ask me. I'm here. I have a few responses initially to what Stephen Litt was saying. My current unit is an almost 3-bedroom. It's a 2-bedroom plus den. I have my recording studio in the den. It's 900 square feet and has land I can grow food and medicines on, and I can invite community to come and work together on art projects on. And the only replacement they've offered is a small unit of about 600 square feet, 1-bedroom. I've been offered in a high-density residential building that I can't do my work in, so there has been no replacement offered, a suitable one. It's my well-informed analysis that we shouldn't be cutting down 211 old-growth trees during a climate crisis, that we shouldn't be destabilizing 6 families during a housing crisis, and that we shouldn't be developing along the Haldeman Tract, specifically with 0 consultation from 6 nations. I think those are pretty salient points. And it's apparent that even though many of you councillors who also have looked into this see the many issues with this development, you feel pressured to make a vote based on the fear of the consequences of this being taken to the OLT and being approved regardless. It's been mentioned to me that there's a cost with that, potentially around $100,000. And firstly, I'll say, I think the point of all of us coming and spending our many hours at these meetings is to fairly assess these projects and give them a chance to be approved or rejected based on principle. Secondly, it costs the government about $50,000 per year for an unhoused person in the region based on the services they require. require and seek. So there's also a cost with the displacement and destabilization of tenants. So 100,000 versus what could be hundreds of thousands in 5 years. I think Vive has built some wonderful buildings in the city. I had the chance to tour a few downtown today. Ironically, they're modeled after loft buildings, which there's many empty sitting, but they do look cool. Steven, good job, Heather. I do think they look cool, and I think it's great that they're doing this. I do believe, obviously, there's a necessity for people to build rentals. I think we can all agree that's important, but to agree with the last speaker, not during a climate crisis should we be bulldozing our land and cutting down old growth trees. I just don't see where the argument against that is. There's lots of alternative spaces for this proposal that would not even require perhaps many modifications. And I know this is a larger issue we need to address as a city and community and as a country, is how to make housing an affordable human right, not a commodified asset. But in the meantime, we can make a difference by using discretion and allowing and inviting developers to plan with much more consideration for the climate, for housing affordability, and for the Indigenous titles of the land. So I'll just finish here by saying that I do think sometime in the future, like soon, we will look back at moments like this with much more clarity on the immorality of certain aspects, environmental, people, and that those with money, often not, but very often, from privileged historical backgrounds, controlling the security and subsequent mental and physical health outcomes of those who don't have those backgrounds, will be seen as not good. So I want to just close by saying, to echo what everyone's been saying, it's not the proposal that's an issue, it's the location, and I do believe that there's an appropriate location for this development to be elsewhere in the city. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Mohammed. We do have some questions for you. Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you for coming in, Alicia. How will your displacement impact your livelihood? Because you're a performer, right?
Yeah, I'm a performer, and I also have a recording studio, and I do projects with lots of organizations in the city from that studio. And it's already affected me, and like a resident last meeting said, it's had huge impacts on all of our mental and physical health in ways that can't even be quantified. And how it will affect me is if I'm not provided an appropriate alternative from the developer, I will have to probably move elsewhere, to be honest. I'm not sure if I'll be able to stay in Kitchener, and I'll also have to turn to my community and let them know that this kind of thing happened and try and, crowdsource or crowdfund for me to be able to find a new studio space that is appropriate. So I will be impacted. It'll be horrible. I've gone to sleep and woke up with this anxiety since this was told to me, since I got the notice in the mail sometime a year, maybe it was even 2 years ago. I don't know how long this has been going on.
You refer to the property as providing a sustainable community to you and others. Maybe you could just explain that a bit more.
So on this property, there's 211 old trees, very old growth trees. You can see the canopy of them from elsewhere in the city. There's deer, eagle, hawks, osprey, rabbits, every kind of animal you could imagine that use this corridor. And then the people, the humans like myself who live on there, there's several Indigenous families who live in the community, and several of the residents use the land for growing food, we find there's wild berries and different herbal medicines that grow on the property. Another resident uses the land to build things, and it's a very utilized space by the community. there's gatherings happen musically and community-wise, and so it's, I understand that the other tenant has accepted an alternative residence from the developer, but I do believe that it's because they were afraid of potential homelessness, which they expressed last time, and they didn't think that they could. I'm not afraid to fight for this because I have spent my entire career looking at issues like this, and so that's why I'm here today.
Thank you, and thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Councillor Deneau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for your presentation. I just have a question, and I'm not being sarcastic at all. Have you or any of your tenants reached out to any other levels of government, provincial, specifically provincial, because they are the ones that control and essentially dictate the land tribunal? And as you referred to, you know, not being afraid to take it to the tribunal, in my short time on council here, I've seen and I've heard and I've witnessed, is it 98% of the time that a developer takes a municipality to the tribunal, the developer wins. I think it's wrong, I really do. So we need to have other advocates like yourself fighting and working with the provincial government as well, reaching out to your MPP, writing letters to any minister that will listen and say this is wrong, because as a council and as a councillor, I can't do it by myself. And so my question is, have you or any of your group reached out to any of the provincial politicians?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I've posted about this I've withheld posting about this on my network, which includes a lot of MPPs who have been friends with, follow me, because I've been waiting to see what the outcome of the situation is. And as far as I understand, when or if this goes to the OLT, then I'm able to delegate legally and go to court and do all the things you said. But I do agree, and I tried so far to use my energy just to catalyze awareness around it in the city, but I absolutely want to, I know this is a bigger issue, so I'm looking forward to advocating more provincially and federally too.
And I agree, and I've been an advocate for long-term care for many, many years, and I understand it's a struggle sometimes, and there have been moments where I've just said, I don't care anymore, but that's not who I am, and I get the sense that's not who you are as well, so I really, really encourage you to keep up with that advocacy and to make waves with the provincial government. You know, elections matter, and this is a specific example of why elections matter. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Deneau. Councillor Ioannidis.
Thanks, Mayor Urbanovic, and thanks, Felicia, for coming in. I guess my questions would be, because when I hear from the proponent offering 5 years, like exact same rent, to me that is quite impressive, to be honest.
He didn't say exact same. There's still going to be that incremental increase.
Well, be an incremental increase as in the sense of the rate of inflation with the government is what I understand. So that would happen regardless in your unit now.
Sure.
When considering probably legislatively, that's 4.5 years more what he deserves to, that not what he deserves, but what he could, like he's over and above. Like, you don't think that's acceptable?
I mean, I'm looking at more than my possible unhousing in this situation. I'm also looking at the environmental concern and like the civic concern of just planning without damaging further.
There's a lot of talk about the site being environmental. It's probably a site that has GRCA legislation on it. If I'm going to ask that question later, but if that's the case, then this site has been looked at with a fine-tooth comb, environmentally wise. But anyways, I want to know if Vive took you on any tours or talked to you about any other sites for you in particular.
Not not specifically for me. I joined another tenant today to view another building, which I said looked nice. However, it's like, 2/3 of the size of my current space, and I wouldn't be able to have my studio there. And the other tenant also did not find it appropriate because they currently are in a detached house that has like 4 bedrooms, and they're being asked to move to a tiny unit.
Okay, sorry, I didn't quite hear you. So you went on a tour with him, and what did he show you, Mr.
Well, he
Litt?
didn't show me. Someone else from the company showed me a unit in downtown Kitchener at a building that they have also just built, which I think is a great spot to build it. I'm sure that, the environmental impact of that space had already been done 100 years ago. So it's a great space to build, cool building. It won't work for me. Another tenant said it won't work for them, but I have nothing against the principle of them building. I think just,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Ioannidis. Councillor Owaduni.
Thank you very much, Mayor Barry. Just looking back, I know I've heard the community garden a few times and I don't know what, in terms of what the park is going to look like. Is there an opportunity to be able to build a garden upon that park?
Well, I feel like, I think it would be great if any time a building is built, there's room for tenants to grow food in these buildings. I think that's a great idea. I haven't heard anything about that, so I'm not sure.
Okay. And my second question, I think, was the one around having different options. What was the one unit that you were shown? Was that the only option that you were given, or were there several options to select from?
So I just tagged along today. I wasn't invited. I just went. Surprise. But the building I was shown is the building they've already built next door to where we are. And
That was the only option that you were shown?
that was the only option, yeah. There was already leaks in the ceiling, and the superintendent had mentioned, I've been trying to get a hold of Vive for weeks, blah, blah, blah. So this is not a good look. I'm, scoping out this building to potentially live there, and that was my impression of it. So didn't really instill much faith beyond obviously not being appropriate anyway for me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Owaduni. Councillor Singh.
And so if an appropriate space that's larger that could be provided, that would ease your concerns?
Yeah, it would ease, as long as every tenant, if every tenant was taken care of appropriately, but like I said, it's that, plus I am also in community with these trees. These trees are, their heritage as well. We keep talking about the house, but these trees, I think that they succeed the age of the house even, and every day I wake up and look out at these trees, I am heartbroken knowing that they might be cut down unnecessarily when this build could be built somewhere that's not going to impact that way. Personally, if I were given an alternative that could work, then I'd obviously be much happier, but that's not the only concern with this issue.
Okay, so I would have a clarification question later, but I'll just carry on just a little quicker regarding the site. You mentioned, of course, there's a lot of trees and natural landscaping and it being along the river, but there's industrial near there as well. So how does that offset, would you say? There's other commercial adjacent to the down Lancaster. So there are environmental impacts from that type of use currently as well, isn't there?
I haven't seen much commercial on that.
On Lancaster down, Lancaster going towards Bridge? Okay.
No, it's pretty empty. It's pretty residential. I don't know what other residents could say, but there's not a lot there.
I don't frequent that area as much, but I've visited Onyx, so there's a few buildings going along Lancaster, but that's aside the case. Now, we've helped to prolong, further progress conversation with the previous tenant. It's great that they were kind of accommodated, and you've raised a point. Mr. Mayor, would it be okay if you can get a clarification question from the proponent regarding adequate space?
We can come back to them later.
Yeah, okay, all right, thank you. We'll ask that.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Singh, and those appear to be all the questions.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Mohammed. Next, we have Ryan Garibaldi. Welcome, Mr. Garibaldi.
Good evening, Mayor, councillors, city staff, possibly, not sure, sorry. Coming here today, I did a few follow-up questions. I spoke at the last planning incentives meeting when Paula Sawicki spoke on behalf of the region regarding the transportation stuff. I had a few questions, so I reached out to her on email, one being like mainly jargon stuff, like what is a AAA bike route she made mention to and stuff like that. So I got a few things back that I'm not sure how much of the councillors actually know beyond the questions that were asked at the meeting. She advised that there was another traffic survey done. The original traffic survey was done during stage 1 of reopening from COVID. Businesses were closed, schools were closed, essential retail was at 25% capacity. That is the traffic survey that was included in the original report for the planning or for the development of this proposed project. She told me just the other day on Friday at 4 o'clock at the 11th hour that there's supposedly been another traffic survey that's been done on April 12th, 2023. And she actually claims that the traffic counts on that day were lower than during stage 1 of reopening on the Lancaster-Bridgeport Road intersection, which I find absolutely ridiculous. There's no possible way. Regarding the bike lane and multi-use trail, she also claims that Lancaster Street between Bridgeport Road and Bridge Street, that further study will need to be done to determine what can be constructed. There will be land given back to the region along Lancaster Street by the city that will help to give more flexibility as to what can be constructed in the corridor. It seems like there's a lot of what-ifs coming down before this project is even getting off the ground, and it's all based around traffic for me. Again, I am not a resident. I live on General Drive, so I'm a resident of the neighborhood, but I'm not affected by the Heritage Homes with some of their residents like Alicia and some of the others that are here tonight. They also said that there's also going to be, she also made mention about a middle turn lane on Lancaster Street to try and ease some of the traffic flow in the turning. That basically said that the final cross-section has still not been determined at this point. So again, there's talk of it, but there's nothing that's been done further to even contemplate the suggestion of the idea other than the thought process of maybe we should put a middle turn lane there. I live on General Drive, like I said. Coming off my street, we have one access in and out of our neighborhood, and that's Lancaster Street. If you need to turn right, it's a real pain in the rear end. You need to turn left, it's damn near impossible most of the day. I work from home. I have an office in Waterloo, so I commute back and forth occasionally throughout the days. It doesn't seem to matter what time of day it is. I asked the region, I asked Paula if there would be any chance of putting a traffic light, a motion-activated traffic light. Pull up to the stop sign on General or the stoplight, 10-second window, at least you can stop traffic, because the traffic from the roundabout does not stop coming. It just keeps coming up the hill. We can't get off our street. The other thing that no one has talked about yet is also a big building that we've been watching dump trucks drive by for 2 or 3 years out on Bridge Street. It's 300 Bridge Street East. There's actually planning in effect already for 156,000 square foot, I'm guessing warehouse cross-dock type facility, and that's on partition 1 of 3 parts of this property. Again, how are those transport trucks, those 18-wheelers that are going to service this facility, get there? They're going to come down Bridgeport Road, down Lancaster Street, across the Bridge Street Bridge. That's how they're going to be able to access it. They're not going to come up through Breslau, through that windy hill up the road. It's not going to happen. Again, more traffic, foreseeable traffic in the future for projects that are ongoing and already approved. Have the school boards been talked to yet regarding the influx of residents coming in? Both the schools, Bridgeport Public School and St. Teresa Catholic School, were both built in the 50s. St. Teresa still does not even have air conditioning, so I'm not sure how much consult's been done with regards to the school boards. The city the city staff just redid the Crosby zoning. 2-3 years, God knows how many people hours, taxpayers' dollars. We're jumping at the gun here, and I get everyone keeps threatening this OLT, but at the end of the day, you guys are all going to be out of your decision-making processes soon too, because these developers know they can come in, they can wave it in front of you, you guys can make a decision, but your decision doesn't mean squat, because they just turn around and go to the OLT, and everything gets approved. This type of building does not belong in that neighborhood. The traffic, the infrastructure does not support it. This is something that should be, and we're setting precedent for along the Grand River to put up these towers. Again, we don't need that in that location. We can't get in and out as it is. I think the OLT, if Mr. Litton, the developer, were to turn around and put up what is permitted there, 8 to 10-story buildings, maybe 3 to 4 of them, depending on what they do, with the promise of moving the homes and now giving back a third of the cost of moving the homes to the community and destroying them, maybe that he could put in 400 to 500 units easily in those buildings. The OLT should be satisfied with some of that. The infrastructure can't handle it. There's got to be an argument of somewhat, not just an OLT rule. For the councillors, also, out of curiosity, just to raise a hands, how many people are residents here in the neighborhood in this directly going to be affected by this build? So pretty much everyone in the room, except for the developer and all the councillors. You guys aren't there. You guys haven't been there. I know I talked to a couple of councillors, and I appreciate you guys taking my emails and returning my phone call and scheduling a phone call with you. I appreciate it. The rest, again, you all received the same email, and I didn't hear from a whole bunch of you. I know your lives are busy, but this might not matter much to you. This could be a simple, easy decision vote, but this affects our lives and all these people's lives around you here, in our neighborhood, in our community. He wants to put a park in. We have a park. The city put a park in. We don't need more parks.
If you can wrap up, please.
Okay, sure. So basically, on behalf of myself, all the residents in attendance, the community, we beg you just to please vote no on this proposed building project. If turning Bridgeport into a complete gridlock for years to come, the detrimental effects on the Grand River watershed and setting precedent for these sort of buildings along our heritage river is what you want to be your legacy you leave behind from your time in council, it's a real shame. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garibaldi. We do have some questions for you. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Garibaldi. And thank you for playing some telephone tag with me this week. I did appreciate having the opportunity to speak with you. And we spoke quite a bit about the traffic, and having read some information from the region about that they're saying that future expected loads of service on the roundabout in the peak hours is expected to remain the same or deteriorate slightly. What are your thoughts on that?
It's not. Again, there's more development going on everywhere. Again, just if those massive buildings, I only found out today, 156,000 square foot facility, and that's only one of 3 that's going to be up on that property. Again, that's all traffic coming through that roundabout. There is one only access over the bridge there, unless you're going out to Victoria Street. It's not going to reduce. And again, even those numbers you got, do you mind me asking what survey that was from, or what report that they had given you? Was it the one from during stage 1 of COVID?
I didn't write that down. I'm sorry about
no
that.
Problem. No problem.
Yeah. So I was also wondering, so when people in your neighborhood are trying to get in and out, they're probably going and using the roundabout to be able to get...
Actually, the complete opposite.
Maybe not from General Drive, but I would think from the other side of the road that they would be. Yeah, I'm wondering if most people are going down there and then if they are doing a complete circle, or do you think that they're going elsewhere, or do you think they're using that to go around to be able to come back again?
Can I ask you what you've found from your personal experience? Did you not visit the residents?
I did.
And you tried to get onto Lancaster Street to turn left to go up the Bridgeport Road from the Heritage Homes, and what did you have to do?
Well, I turned right.
Turn right down the roundabout, because no how in hell were you getting out turning left there, especially that close to the light where these buildings are proposed to go with 1,300 units. I can't get off my street turning left. I can usually get out turning right unless someone coming up the hill in gridlock stops and kind of waves you on. But the problem is the traffic's coming whipping down the other way. You're still not getting anywhere. We're stuck. And again, as I said, it's one access point to our subdivision.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Davey.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Garibaldi, for coming in and for frankly representing the traffic concerns I've heard for many years of your whole street and your adjacent street on Lang as well. I wanted to clarify the decision that we're making tonight, and it's a bit of a point of frustration for myself as well, if you'll allow me, Mr. Mayor, just for an explanation. The recommendation is really void of solving the traffic problem. There's a thing called a holding provision in the recommendation that basically says the region, which we don't have any, the mayor sits on the region, so you might want to send him a couple of emails in the future, but the region is really going to, there's like an asterisk, and the region is saying they're going to solve this problem later before the developer is allowed to go ahead and do something. And it has to come back to this council to release that holding provision so that they can go ahead. Now, I still have some questions about the process for that. I'm hoping the residents can have an opportunity to speak to the region to explain the disconnect between what, frankly, what they're saying and what you guys are experiencing. But just in terms of the decision we're making today, specifically to the traffic, which I personally believe is far and away the biggest concern with this whole project is the traffic. That's a decision that the region's going to have to address and hopefully engage everyone and come back to us at some point to release that. I just wanted to be clear on that to you and the local residents.
So I can just ask clarification then? So basically, then you guys are voting on this to be conditionally approved tonight?
Essentially. I mean,
based on the region, but again,
I'll confirm that use of terminology conditionally approved with our planning staff, but that's my understanding, yes.
Okay, and because I've asked the region about, council meeting like this of sorts, and the answer I got was, no, there isn't one.
Yeah, and I'll be frank with you, like, putting in a multi-use cycling lane is not going to solve the problem, so I'm not going to be...
You're just cannibalizing lanes of traffic, basically, and vehicle traffic, yep, 100%.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor David. Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, my question had to do with the traffic as well, but I just wanted clarification on something you said. You said you asked the region to put in a traffic light, and I didn't catch your response. What the response?
So I basically had asked them if there was any plans on putting in a traffic light at the corner of General and Lancaster Street, whether it be a motion-activated one, whatever. There's no need for a crosswalk there, to be honest with you, because the other side of the street, the sidewalk only starts at the Lanc, and it's basically the Lancaster Lanc building or the Lancaster Smokehouse now, the sidewalk and the road. But just even putting a stoplight in there that could be motion activated, like whether it's a beam or like the pressure sensitive things in the ground on the asphalt that we could pull up, and it would literally change the light for 10 seconds, at least stop the traffic so we can pull out and turn left. And they basically said, no, there's no plans for that whatsoever. But yet again, all this stuff of planning with Lancaster Street to make this development work, it seems they're putting the cart before the horse. Like if we don't have it, we can't have it. You know what I mean? So it's frustrating.
Okay, thank you.
Those appear to, thanks, Councillor Chapman. Those appear to be all the questions. Mr.
Thank you to all the residents for coming out tonight. I appreciate it.
Our next delegation is Mr. William Martin. Welcome, Mr. Martin.
Been a while, Barry. Haven't seen you. I've heard about this proposal down in Bridgeport and Lancaster on these, I guess, apartment buildings or rental houses. And it's funny, today I talked to the Land Registry Act of the Six Nations. I am Six Nations Indigenous myself. What happened to the treaty? 5 miles on each side of the Grand River. I've heard this gentleman saying, oh, we'll make donations. The Land Registry Office had no indication about building on our land. Our land. Six Nation Council had no communication from this gentleman. Once again, our land. Our land's being stripped. It says right here, we used to have 950,000 acres of land along the Grand River. We have 48,000, and every year that's deteriorating. Taking our land. We used to fish in there, drink water in there, traveled in there. And you sit here, and I hear about our land being stripped every year. Every year. But we don't hear from you. How many of you have reached out to the Six Nations Indian Council or the Registry Act? That's a really hard matter when you keep stealing our land. How long has it been going on? How many of you have reached out to the Six Nations Council? How long has been development going on the Grand River without Six Nations knowing about it? The gentleman speaking to me today from the Land Registry Office, said he just started hearing from the city of Kitchener, but for so long there was no communication. And you talk about reconciliation. There is no reconciliation if you keep stealing our land. How can you go forward? How can you look in the mirror and talk about reconciliation? There isn't any. Every year, something keeps being stolen from us. I'm speaking from the heart right now, knowing that that Grand River used to be sacred ground. It's not anymore. Why? I'm looking at every one of you in the eye right now. Why do we keep stealing the land? I hear reconciliation. To me, it's a word that's being way overused with no meaning behind it. Development, there's probably lots of land around, but Six Nations, that Grand River is sacred ground to us. 48,000 acres left that was given to us, that's left over. What's that number going to be next year or the year after that? When's it come to the point when we have 0 acres left on redevelopment? That is sacred Six Nations territory. And I'm going to speak up. I have to speak up now. I'm working with other people in government on reconciliation, because it's a word that's just way overused with no meaning behind it. But you want to keep taking our land. And you say reconciliation. You acknowledge the First Nations people. How can you acknowledge First Nations people when it's being taken from us? What do we do going forward on reconciliation? How do we start going forward? This is not a good step. This is our land. Our land. And that's about what I have to say on this matter. It really upsets me knowing that the Grand River territory is being redeveloped without our knowledge. I can give you the guy's name. He had no clue today that there was redevelopment in that area along the Grand River. No clue. No communication. What do we do to go forward? You're taking our land. Is that the right thing to do? That treaty was signed years, hundreds of years ago. But you keep taking, keep breaking it. Reconciliation. Word being used way too much. Is this reconciliation stealing our land? Think about that. You want to redevelop on the Grand River? Talk to us. Is there any compensation to the Six Nations Indian Council? This agreement that we made hundreds of years ago? What do we do to go forward? Talk about transparency, accountability. There isn't any with the Six Nations because we obviously didn't know about this project.
Mr. Martin, if I can ask you to start wrapping up, please.
That's about what I have to say. This is injustice, and I keep saying, reconciliation. How can we do reconciliation when there's no communication with us?
Okay. Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate you coming in this evening, and there don't appear to be any questions. Is that it? Yep. There don't appear to be any questions. Thank you for coming in, sir. Our next delegation is Mr. Dan O'Driscoll. O'Driscoll? O'Driscoll. My apologies, sir.
Happens all the time.
Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. As noted, my name is Dan O'Driscoll, and I'm a resident of General Drive, which, as I believe you're all aware, is directly across Lancaster Street from the proposed development. I'm before you tonight to add my voice to those of all the concerned citizens who've already spoken and those who are here but have not yet spoken and may not. But I know that they share my high concern in opposition to this development. It is my belief that if this development is allowed to proceed as it is currently proposed, it will have a significant detrimental impact on the lives of the residents of my street, General Drive, and those of the surrounding neighborhoods as well, such as Lang Crescent. I attended the previous council meeting on May 8th when this proposal was last discussed. At that meeting, I heard Councillor Davey ask of the city staff questions as to the success rate when developers appeal decisions to the Ontario Land Tribunal. Earlier this evening, someone suggested that that might be a 90% rate. At the last meeting, it was suggested that it's actually more like a 97% success rate on behalf of the developers. It's sad to recognize the current provincial climate, which essentially overrides municipal judgment in local matters. It's pathetic. However, given that reality, I accept that this development is likely to proceed. I believe that Council, however, must demand reasonable amendments to the developer's proposal as it currently exists. My primary objections to the proposal can be distilled down to issues of public safety. Council must ensure that the residents of General Drive and Lang Crescent can safely and effectively enter and exit our streets to and from Lancaster. Beg your pardon. Recognize, too, that school buses use General Drive and Lang at peak times as part of their routes, and they face the same safety issues as residents do trying to access Lancaster. This maneuver is already precarious at the best of times and will only get worse if this development proceeds as planned. I would like Council to explore the following potential changes. Reduce the huge size of the development as a means of then reducing the total number of vehicles that will occupy it. Increase the number of parking spaces required at the development to at least 1 per unit as a means of reducing the suggested overflow parking onto General Drive and Lang Crescent. Overflow parking on these streets will lead to inevitable pedestrian accidents as people who are parking on those streets try to cross Lancaster to get to the development. They're not going to walk all the way up the hill of Lancaster to the Bridgeport intersection and cross at the lights. That's laughable. They're going to try crossing in a dangerous situation on Lancaster. Require a change to the location of the main entrance to this development from Lancaster. This driveway comes on to Lancaster just behind the existing Tim Hortons. As people turn the corner at that intersection, people are going to be trying to come out of this intersection, out of this development or turn into this development. And it's already pretty scary coming around that corner and you encounter a bus parked there. This is only going to get worse with that driveway located where it is. I would suggest that the driveway to this development instead be moved to the cul-de-sac off of Riverbend Drive behind the Tim Hortons. I recognize that the developer may not currently own property to allow that access, but I imagine that it's a feasible thing to explore. And they probably have the means and the connections to make that happen. This will divert traffic from Lancaster as a result of this and make it flow more efficiently onto Riverbend Drive and make use of existing traffic lights at Bridgeport and Lancaster. As mentioned earlier, the traffic studies to date are suspect. They need to be redone under current conditions, not with rose-colored glasses on. Lastly, maybe I'm lying there, make approval of the development contingent on the region identifying and implementing changes that will introduce breaks in the traffic pattern along Lancaster. With the roundabout that was introduced at Bridge and Lancaster, it's a constant traffic flow. As you heard earlier, and I'll try not to belabor the point, we cannot get on and off of our streets safely.
You can wrap up, please, Mr. O'Driscoll.
Certainly. This council recently considered the issue of closing the ramps from Highway 85 to Lancaster. At that time, Councillor Davey once again was quoted in the record as saying that the ramps were, quote, right in that exact corner of Bridgeport and Lancaster where the traffic is the absolute worst, end quote. I know Councillor Davey understands the situation here. As a council, I ask that you please take seriously the concerns of the existing residents of these neighborhoods and don't make our lives a living hell. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Driscoll. There do not appear to be any questions, so thank you for coming in this evening.
Appreciate your attention.
Okay, and we do have one of the earlier delegations who now has logged in, and so I would ask for Danny Lindemood from Water Watchers, please. Welcome, Ms. Lindemood.
Thank you so much, and a special little shout out to the staff team who worked to help actually get me here to delegate. I didn't receive instructions, so I'm very, very grateful to be present. My name is Danny Lindemood, and I am the Programs Director with Water Watchers, which is an organization born in Guelph that has grown into a provincial water advocacy group. We support grassroots organizing and advocacy around water protection, especially where it intersects with other social and environmental justice issues. I actually myself lived in Kitchener for about 5 years, and I love the city of Kitchener, and I'm still in the region just downstream from you in Cambridge now. And this is a community that I dearly love, and I'm so pleased that I get to be here to speak on behalf of this issue. I'm going to speak to 3 main concerns this evening, and the first is the water herself. The Grand River is the lifeblood of our collective watershed. It is undergoing immense development pressure, and it's showing qualitative and quantitative signs of decreased health. And you've heard already all of the life that depends on this habitat that the Grand River provides, the Grand River and its adjoining lands. And there are the animals themselves, the beavers, the coyotes, the deer, the birds, as well as the trees. They're all interconnected with the river. And this is an ecological corridor, and it really should be protected as one. If we don't draw the line somewhere, there will be no corridors left, quite frankly. And the impacts of this proposal to the Grand River have actually not been adequately established. And I heard another councillor kind of raise concern around this earlier around GRCA lands, and I appreciate that. The environmental impact assessment that was, or the environmental impact study that was done was so narrowly scoped, and it really just doesn't reflect all that this subject property needs to in its connection with the Grand River. We are all connected by our shared watershed, and we need to make decisions with the water and all of the connections that depend on her in mind, and that means with all life in mind. I'm going to spend most of my time on this next topic tonight, and that is Indigenous sovereignty and settler treaty responsibilities. I am very concerned that there has been no consultation with Six Nations, traditional or band councils on this proposal. In my mind, this is really an egregious oversight, which should be rectified before any decisions are taken. When asked about this in a community engagement presentation that the city gave, an answer was given to the effect of consultation is happening on the City of Kitchener official or strategic plan, and that's not good enough. You are not the keepers of when and how consultation should happen, and reconciliation depends on proper and consistent consultation and consent and communication. These obligations are important, and I ask you, the City of Kitchener, that you honor your treaty responsibilities, and I ask that you also demand the developer engage in meaningful Indigenous consultation and consent process as well. Consultation is not a consent either, and we ask also that you really consider that consent and consultation are different. I work closely with a number of folks from many different local Indigenous communities in my role at Water Watchers, and they have consistently communicated their deep present and ancestral disappointment with how settler governments treat the duty to consult. And you just heard firsthand from someone who's speaking from this positionality and what it means to him. Hear him when he says his traditional practices cannot be continued, that he cannot live from the land. Hear him when he says this proposal is for stolen land, sacred Six Nations territory. Hear him when he asks you to come to the table. Hear him and act. This is land that, these subject lands are in an area where there is also a moratorium on development called by the Haudenosaunee Confederacy Council, and that is a reflection of this deep frustration as well. The subject lands, as I said, are in the heart of the Haldimand Tract, and I implore you to learn more about the moratorium and to be engaging in good faith with these folks. Last, but not least, to hearing the community members, and especially those from marginalized and systematically disenfranchised groups, I think is really, really important. You've heard from them again and again that they've begged you to not let this proposal go forward as is for environmental reasons, for traffic reasons, for social reasons. And just because a developer is offering better than average doesn't mean that it's actually good. Two wrongs do not make a right here. But you can actually do right in this situation. You can delay a decision until proper environmental, social, and Indigenous concerns have been addressed. You can direct staff to look further into these concerns raised here tonight.
Ms. Lindemuth, if I can ask you to wrap up, please.
Absolutely. I was just going to say, I just want to finish by saying that I really appreciate this opportunity to speak on behalf of my organization, but also on behalf of our shared waters and the community that we all love. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us virtually. Folks, there's no applause allowed in the council chamber, please. Thank you. Councillor Deneau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, Danny, for your presentation or for your education for us. Quick question, GRCA, you mentioned the environmental assessment was very narrow in its scope. Can you explain why you believe that it was narrow in its scope, please?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd have to pull up the EA specifically to speak to the technicals on it, but when I was reviewing it, what was particularly concerning to me, it was actually that it doesn't look at any of its relational impacts on the lands around it. It was very narrowly scoped to, the first part of it was very narrowly scoped to something that was just on the subject property that had nothing to do with other relations and connections with the corridors or the river itself. And then beyond that, there was a secondary one that was done that was looking at some sort of hydrogeological impact, but it was very, very narrow for a groundwater focus. And so with that in mind, it was not actually looking at its connection to the river either. And this subject property has to be situated into its environmental assessment, and it's assessed in its relation to this larger landscape. It's unwise and really scientifically unsound to say that the environmental impacts are like in this little place where we're going to build, because we all know that what happens here flows downstream and it flows downhill. And as the subject lands are also on elevated space directly adjacent to the Grand River, this can't be understated that the scope needs to be widened to actually look at the impacts to the Grand River, which then flows to our treaty partners downstream. It flows to my home downstream. There's so many considerations that need to be taken there. And beyond that too, when you broaden the scope, you actually get to capture the impacts to the wildlife that were mentioned earlier. And someone mentioned endangered species and said, yes, there are none on the lands, but there are on the Grand River lands. And I think that that's really, really important and can't be understated and must be looked at.
Okay, and one last question then, and thank you for your response. Would you say historically any EAs that the GRCA has completed have been narrow in scope, or are they usually pretty substantive when they conduct them, of what you've read in the past?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's entirely dependent on the proposal, because the scope of the proposal and the scale of the proposal and other dimensions like proximity are all the things that matter. No, the GRCA might not be looking at, okay, well, the sediment flows as they go, whatever, 100 kilometers. No, they're not looking at that. But they are looking at the place-based impacts, and it depends how broadly that goes based on the proposal in question.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for your question.
Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Mayor Urbanovic, and thank you for coming in. Just out of curiosity, I've never heard of your organization before. Where is your organization from?
We're headquartered in Guelph, as I said in my introduction.
In Guelph, okay. And just to follow up on Councillor Deneau's question, do you work closely with GRCA?
We don't work closely with the GRCA in our work specifically, like as in we don't do projects that are on the GRCA's specific scope of work, but we do talk with the GRCA quite frequently about concerns in our collective watershed. It's the nature of doing water work that you're talking with the other actors and building those relationships and hearing how they're thinking about concerns and how they're addressing them.
Okay. So if GRCA had no concerns with the site, you would tend to agree with them?
Oh, working together and agreeing are not the same, and I'm sure that you sitting around the council table of councillors all know that very well. No, just because the GRCA doesn't have concerns doesn't mean that we don't have concerns. We've seen the way that they've been systemically by the province, that their mandate has been undermined, that their funding has been undermined, that their scope has been undermined. For actually getting to do what they are supposed to as an organization do. They do the best with what they can, and they have a highly scientific focus. And an environmental assessment goes beyond just the science, and our concerns as an organization, as I'm sure you can tell by how much time I spent talking about our obligations and responsibilities as treaty partners, those go farther beyond the scientific scope too. And our environment is not an environment that exists by itself. It exists in relation to us, and it should be assessed like that. So that's usually where tensions might arise with organizations that are more looking very narrowly scoped at the scientific pieces and metrics than what we do, which is looking at a landscape and a community and a watershed more holistically.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ioannidis. Councillor Singh.
Yeah, hi, Danny. Through Councillor Ioannidis' question, you raised a couple points, and you said you had some concerns with the EA, which was as part of the requirement of this application, More specifically, the development's impact related to the surrounding properties. I had asked a question of the delegate before, and I wasn't fully aware, and so I did a little look into a GIS mapping. It's a global information system, outlines all the properties. 564 is a industrial use property right now that's directly behind 550 and 544 Lancaster, as well as 675 Riverbend, which is a commercial current use and has a substantively large parking surface area that likely, has fossil burning vehicles. Where would the concerns lie related to that environmental impact?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Councillor Singh. I'd like first to clarify what you said I said. I said that I am concerned about the impacts of the adjacent impacts, and subject properties or other properties that are like adjacent to the subject property rather are definitely can be a concern in general. In this case in particular, I noted that my objection is to its proximity to a wildlife corridor and the proposed destruction of that wildlife corridor, as well as to the Grand River itself. It's right next to it. And that is really the scope that I think for me and from our perspective as an organization, that's the thing that I'm taking issue with in what's been done.
Okay, I understand your organization is not specifically in the region of Waterloo, but still understand the full context. When we have an application that's supported by staff and has met the requirements of submitting a full application, and staff have deemed those reports satisfactory in their consideration of approval, if we were to turn it down or even delay it, the developer could choose, due to Bill 23, Bill 109, and take it to the OLT, and in which case 97% of those applications are supported in favor of the developer, and it makes it even harder when you have an application that's already supported by our staff, in which case we have to then argue against our staff's recommendation before that tribunal, and that comes at a substantive cost to our taxpayers. What do you have to say to that?
I say that it is a shame that we are making decisions in a system that when we elevate a decision to the provincial level that is set up to validate the developers or the proponent's perspective. That is a shame. And it doesn't mean that we can't do whatever is within our power at the scales that we do have the power to act and to make good decisions and to make decisions that are aligned with what the community wants and what the environment is asking of us and what our Indigenous treaty partners are asking of us. For me, I think that we need to make the decisions that we need to make at our scale, at your scale, at the municipal level, and take that consideration, take that stance, and if the province uses its power and purview to overstep that, that's a systemic failure, and yet we still would have lived up to what we should be doing at the local level. And that's what I'm asking of each and every one of you, is to step up to what you should be doing at this local level with your power and with your purview.
Yeah, I agree with you that much. It is a systemic failure. I think it's very hard when we are held hostage and where we have to support because knowing the repercussions could be contrary to the benefits of our community. And that's a challenge. And that's where we have to weigh both. But thank you. I appreciate your comments.
Yeah. Is it okay if I add one thing? Through you, Mayor.
Yeah, sure. Just if you want to respond to Councillor Singh, and then and then the time is up.
Thank you. The one thing that I would add is that within our work, I mentioned that we do grassroots organizing work, and we've seen time and time again through our work this kind of feeling of, oh man, like this thing, this project, this whatever it is that we're helping support a community to protect water through, that it's a done deal. And we have lived the truth that again and again it is not a done deal, and we have won in many different situations. We were behind the first eradication of some of the land use planning tools that the province has been using, the MZOs, and that is a win, and that is exciting. So I just want to say too, like, that there's possibility when you take a stance and you do what's right and you don't succumb to the inertia of systemic failure.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Linda Mood.
Thank you.
Okay, Council, we've now heard from all of the delegations. We'll now take questions of staff. Councillor Michaud.
Thank you. Could staff give us an idea of what the cost would be if this went to the OLT? I know you're not all lawyers or something, but from experience.
Okay, folks. Yes, who's going to take that? Mr. Reedman? Okay, folks, please. Delegations have had their opportunity. No comments from the gallery. Mr. Reedman, if you would like to respond to Councillor's question.
Through the mayor, so it really does depend on how the appeal moves forward. So there's a few different mechanisms for that to happen. One could be if council refuses the decision that planning staff support. Our legal counsel would have to retain external planning advice to support council's position in that. If this is approved here and it's appealed by residents, then it's a different amount. So it would likely be minimal on our end, except for staff attendance at an appeal.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Michaud, you still have the floor. Is that it, Councillor Michaud? Okay, Councillor Davey, you have a point of clarification?
Yes, sorry. I think the question with respect to Councillor Michaud's question was how much could it cost? And you indicated that we couldn't even use our own city staff. We'd have to hire outside legal counsel if this council turned it down. But as I recall, that is but a fraction of the potential cost. So if staff could clarify, I'd appreciate that.
Mr. Reedman?
Yeah, through the chair. So external legal would also be required to support our staff through that process. And so it can be quite significant. And so typically when it goes that avenue, there's likely a settlement that's reached because the costs are so high for all parties involved that it doesn't make sense to continue, especially given the rate of decisions at the council or at the OLT over the last few years.
Right, and to clarify too, so and as well, recently I believe it was Bill 109, I could be incorrect, could be Bill 23, but is the OLT not at liberty as they see fit to assign legal damages, in other words, the cost of the developer's lawyers, against the city as well?
Mr. Reedman?
Through the mayor, that is correct. Any party that appeals a development application could have costs recouped based on the OLT decision.
Right, and finally, in terms of cost, any of the offers that the developer has made to this point in terms of relocating the people that are displaced, any potential donations to the working center or for the park amenities, those could all be off the table as well.
Through the chair, any agreements that are made could be off the table and the application could be revised based on going to a hearing to offset the cost that the developer has to pay.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Deneau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I believe this question was asked at the last meeting discussing this item. What is the city's duty to consult with Indigenous communities along the Grand?
Ms. Grob?
Through the mayor, I would refer council to the email sent by city solicitor earlier today with respect to questions around duty to consult.
Okay, I guess my next question would be, did we? That's all right, that's all I have. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Yes,
Oops, sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So when we receive planning applications from developers, are we obligated to deal with that actual application at that actual site? And that's the only way that we can deal with an application?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So the Planning Act provides mechanisms for any property owner or developer or applicant to make applications to amend the official plan or the zoning bylaw of any municipality in Ontario. The Act also prescribes the process and the timelines that we are obligated to follow. So we follow the prescriptive measures of the Planning Act when processing development applications. So upon receipt of a complete application, we must process it in accordance with the Planning Act.
Okay, and that would mean then that we deal with an application for that particular application at that particular address?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. Also, I'm wondering, I found Mr. O'Driscoll's comments interesting about looking into suggestions for alternative exits onto Riverbend Drive, et cetera, to kind of perhaps help facilitate traffic flow there. Is that something that we've looked at or considered at all?
Mr. Stevenson, if I can ask you to just leave your mic on, please.
Sure. So through you, Mr. Mayor, it's not something that we specifically have looked at. The adjacent lands have been site plan approved for a future office development that is still underway. It's sort of on hold. I would suggest that comment can be directed or a question to the developer to see if there's interest in additional either property acquisition or easement rights over properties. When there is a lot that has frontage on a public street, we are obligated to ensure that access is provided. In this case, it's consolidated to a singular access. There are several accesses now. However, obviously, one single access would have more transportation movements than the existing accesses do now.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Mr. Mayor, is that a possibility to bring Mr. Litt back down to ask that question of?
Yeah, we could ask that now. Mr. Litt, if you want to come to the mic, please. Mr. Litt, if you care to
Mr.
respond
Litt,
to the question.
did you hear that
Thanks for having me back.
question enough, or?
Yeah, my limited knowledge of transportation engineering would suggest that a lot of vehicular traffic through the back access that we don't own, that's owned by an adjacent landowner, is something that we could perhaps look at. I don't know if that could be wrapped up in the same holding provision for the regional road design, Garrett, but it's opening up a new can of worms, asking us to sort of buy a piece of the neighbor's property. It's difficult.
I know, and that's on the spot, but, I thought it was, well, not being a traffic technologist myself, but a creative perspective on that.
For sure. Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Councillor O'Dooney.
Thank you very much, Mayor Barry. Just want to go back to this traffic issue. This has come up several times, and wanted to get your thoughts on what exactly are we hearing from the region, number one. Number two, There are concerns of people pulling out of the building, and want to get your thoughts on, is there something that can be done as this development is being developed in that area through the region for this?
Mr. Stevenson?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so I would suggest that the holding provision requiring an updated transportation impact study would give us the opportunity to look at the unknown question. So the regional comments, they don't note that they are supportive of the development, but the outstanding question is a left-hand turn lane warranted, and can it be accommodated in the location within the right-of-way that is established now, or within a widened right-of-way as a result of land dedications as part of this development application. So the region is supportive of the development, but they are requesting the hold until that is resolved. So that would be by changing the intersection design. There's a possibility that that could have impacts on traffic flow if there were, for example, a dedicated left turn lane where a car waiting to turn left is out of a lane of traffic.
Okay, thank you, Councillor O'Dooney. Councillor Singh.
Yeah, thank you. I had questions similar to what have already been asked, and I think Councillor Davey helped explain or get answers on the process of if this application were to be appealed. But further, there was another issue raised as well by Alicia, mentioning that perhaps you didn't have any suitable accommodations suggested, especially for studio space for her, what she does as a performer. Could I get clarification from Mr. Litt? Would that be okay?
Yep. Mr. Litt, if you can come forward again, please.
Yeah, my counterpart and business partner, Heather, has offered space in the next phase of the project. Obviously, these buildings have amenities that could be easily be designed as a recording studio of such, which we haven't had feedback on. Alternatively, we offered a home on Weber Street that's part of another future land assembly that was offered for, again, a short-term temporary, sort of under a 2-year type frame to be used for that sort of space. So.
And how large is that space? Because she mentioned that it was quite small, wasn't really...
The home's on Weber Street. It had a nail salon on the main floor and a large apartment above, so I believe it's probably 3,000 square feet in total.
So you offered her 3,000 square feet? House
on Weber Street.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay, well, I would hope that you can carry on that conversation.
Would love to.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor, thank you, Councillor Singh. Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you. So I guess this is to staff. It seems like there are many things that I find problematic with what's being done here, but in a particular thing that I want to ask about is regarding the traffic study. So it was stated that there was a new one done in April that showed somehow worse traffic than the one done during COVID or something?
So through
or better traffic than the one during COVID?
Yes, I believe that's what was said, Councillor Chapman.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. So I understand, and I confirmed with Paula Sawicki. So the region does periodic assessments and counts outside of a regular traffic study that would be done for a development application. And as a part of that work that was done, the region has advised that a turning movement was completed and compared to the existing conditions in the Paradigm TIS, which is the traffic study that was prepared for this development application. She goes on to say the 2023 count was less than the report existing conditions. Therefore, the report is conservative.
So does the city ever pay for its own new assessment by a different party rather than Paradigm? Because Paradigm is sort of the go-to company that's being used, and it's not the first time we've had questionable results for a traffic study.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, certainly Paradigm does do a lot of the work in our region. They are all professional staff that complete those, and we have professional staff that review them as well. And there's often review and some clarification that happens as part of the development review process between staff and the preparer of the reports.
So staff wouldn't recommend that we get another study done, even if it was on our dime rather than the region's?
That is not our recommendation at this time.
And regarding the environmental study, I mean, it was brought to our attention that it was a very narrow scope study. Is there, like, can we ask for a wider scoped environmental assessment of this property so that it looks at the surrounding area and not just the site itself, given its location?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, in order to require a revised study, we would have to update a terms of reference. So during the pre-submission period process, before we receive a formal application, we identify any areas of concern or where additional information is required, and those reports are submitted to satisfy that information. In this case, our staff were satisfied with the reports, and the scoped reports covered the main area of interest of review, which was to support a record of site condition. So we, while the reports were scoped, they met our terms of reference and were satisfied with the recommendations.
And after listening to what the residents have said, do you see the virtue in doing something, a bigger study?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, in my experience, our senior environmental planners are quite qualified to review studies, and I trust their assessment, and they were satisfied with the report. So at this time, I wouldn't recommend that we would need to revisit additional reports.
Okay, my other question has to do with, again, a suggestion that came from one of the residents, from Mr. Driscoll. What about the increased number of parking spaces so that it would be at least one per unit, to sort of relieve some of the pressure on the surrounding neighborhood?
Through Mr. Mayor again. So part of the philosophy of oversupplying parking is that it'll become used, and then that'll mean more cars and more traffic. So part of a modern approach to providing transportation alternatives is to support infrastructure beyond just roads and parking, but to support active transportation. An example of that is our cycling grid downtown, multi-use trails that we have, and we are supporting the region on some multi-use trails that will be happening in this area over the next several years. So we want to make sure that a parking supply would meet the demand and not necessarily exceed it, but at the same time that we support alternative and active transportation options as well.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Davey.
Thank you. Actually, most of my questions have been asked. The only question I wanted to ask was regarding the contributions as put forward by the developer. If council goes in that direction, I'm struggling with the way that it would be phrased in terms of essentially in terms of how, like, I understand that with the Planning Act we can't force these sorts of things, and that's fine. But would it be appropriate to have an amendment outlining what the developer has committed in lieu of moving the homes, in your opinion?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, in order to have a community benefit within a prescribed planning instrument, whether it be the official plan amendment or an amending zoning bylaw, it would have to be authorized by the Planning Act, which is no longer the case. I would say that if we wanted documentation of the commitments, we would have to refer to the minutes of this meeting.
Okay. I think I've crafted some amendments to that end. I've just emailed to you as well, and I've copied the clerk. So, sorry, the only other thing is I did include an amendment there as well, because I do think it's a great idea to explore an exit off of or towards Riverbend as well. Would it help if that amendment was explicit in the direction as part of the holding provision that the region is looking at solving the traffic issues?
Through Mr. Mayor, I like the suggestion of adding that as part of the holding provision. That'll give us the ability to have that further review. If the language was to explore that, I don't think we can compel a secondary access, but we can certainly compel the applicant to review it.
Yep, certainly. I think I used the word explore, so thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davey. Councillor Clancy.
Yeah, there is a lot that came just before this meeting, so that has made tonight especially complicated. I just want to follow up on the issue of displacement. To me, that's one of the most important factors. I guess we all have different things that matter, and I thank you for our Indigenous friends for discussing the ancestry of the land. But I just wanted to follow up because I find that there's a lot of back and forth about ensuring that people aren't displaced. And I don't know how to make sure that that commitment to ensuring people aren't displaced is translated into action. Mr. Lick, can you come forward again? I guess I'm asking for some assurances that the folks who have a home continue to have adequate housing.
Yeah, it's a great point. I believe some of the pending work through inclusionary zoning and such, and we talked informally about a rental replacement model that some municipalities in Ontario have, so that's something the city could look at. But on this specific application, you have our word that we'll continue to work with our existing resident neighbors to ensure the best outcome for them. So.
Okay, thank you.
While I'm up here, Mr. Mayor, may I just make 2 comments?
Pertaining to something you said earlier, to clarify?
I would say it's a clarification
Okay,
point.
go ahead.
Yes. Yeah, just to hammer home the point, we're talking about 1,300 rental units in the city of Kitchener on land that is zoned a mixed-use corridor already. The rear of our site has a 6-foot diameter storm pipe that services the neighboring residential lands and industrial lands, an 8-inch sanitary pipe. It's serviced, it's on transit. I am local. I have a 2.5-year-old boy. We ride the bike whenever the opportunity permits down the Walter Bean Trail that separates us, 2 industrial properties, to the Grand River. So there's a great neighborhood community benefit there already, connecting all of Kitchener through cycling network. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Mr. Lick.
Thank you.
Councillor Schneider.
Thank you, Mayor. Just for clarification on the holding provision, in the materials we got today, it was mentioned that whether the region should permit a 2-way center turn lane that is being requested by the developer. So with this holding provision, if the region isn't satisfied, what happens then to this project? Are there delays, more modifications?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so a holding provision is put in place to allow land use decisions with some certainty, with some additional detail to follow. So a holding provision requires additional review and study, but it doesn't necessarily draw the conclusion. So if the region will review whether or not a 2-way turn is required. If it is, they will use their off-site works permit in order to secure that as part of the site plan approval process. If after review they determine it's not warranted, then the holding provision could be lifted. It's just allowing the region the opportunity to take a second look at that before land use permissions are fully enforced.
Okay, thanks for that clarification.
Thank you, Councillor Councillor Schneider. Councillor Chapman, you have, sorry? Yeah, Councillor Michaud, you haven't spoken yet, so go ahead.
I just want to ask that quick. I want to carry on that holding provision piece. So wouldn't it make sense for the region to have this all in place before this project was approved? Seems like the cart before the horse kind of to me. I know, I'm just asking. It's not.
Yeah, through the mayor. So holding provision is a tool that's used when we're comfortable with the overall land use permission, but there's additional detail to follow. So there is additional detail that often follows before a site plan approval process that requires additional study, and that's when we use a holding provision tool to say, before we get into detailed design of site plan and further design and development and investment in additional drawings and studies, to complete these final technical analysis in order to be able to move forward to site plan. So holding provisions are also a tool that we're using almost on every single development application now in order to review development applications within the prescribed timeframes by Bill 23.
So could we defer this until the holding provision, until the region looked into that to see if it could be done or not?
So the process is, the recommendation is to use the holding provision to consider the land use decision matter with the details to follow.
But I'm asking, could it be deferred?
Council does have the option to defer this application should they choose.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Chapman, this is your second round. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Michaud. My question was along the same lines. Is there any other tool that the city has other than a holding provision that would allow us to defer this until we have a traffic study, another traffic study, or that these issues are dealt with? And I'd also like to add to that we do a broader environmental study. I don't know if that would be an amendment to what we have, to the report we have right now, or how that would have to be worded, but...
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the only tool is a holding provision to require additional study. A deferral would be considered a non-decision, and the appellant could appeal a non-decision at any time on both the official plan amendment and the zoning bylaw amendment. So that is a tool that was afforded the Planning Act to allow for local decision-making with some of these details to follow without the threat of a non-decision appeal. We're within the time frame now that the applicant could appeal at any time for non-decision.
Okay, well, I'm not too concerned about that, but so would it be an amendment to the report that would address a broader environmental study? I mean, that wouldn't be a holding provision, right? Is that something that I could bring forward as an amendment to the report?
Through Mr. Mayor, in order to, if you were to add a study at this time, it would have to be through a holding provision. It wouldn't be recommended by planning staff. That would probably be seen as acting in bad faith if we were challenged on that, but that would be the mechanism to do it. Again, I would advise that from a staff level perspective, the environmental study satisfied our review. So I would have to understand more the purpose of the additional study. And staff would need to receive that direction.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Chapman, Councillor Singh, you have a second round of questions?
He actually, at a later part of Councillor Chapman's, I think you did kind of outline some of my concern, but for clarity, because there was visible reaction to those observing this meeting and we kind of their feeling that we're putting the horse before the cart, or the cart before the horse. So if we were to defer this so that the region can have a thorough review of the traffic patterns there and give their assessment, the appellant can go and take this to the OLT, and again, we could lose a lot of the benefits that are already proposed. But in effect, the holding provision does exactly what the concerns of the residents are, and that we would have that good assessment and commentary from the region before we can allow the actual development to proceed forward, irrespective of what the decision of today is. Is that correct?
That is correct. A holding provision is a decision, and then the potential for a non-decision appeal would be lost.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Councillor Johnson.
Yes, thank you. And perhaps, Mr. Stevenson, you can explain exactly how the holding provisions work and how what they would mean in terms of making sure that these pieces are covered around the traffic study, the things with the region, etc.
Certainly. So in the bylaw that's before Council this evening, there's a holding provision. It's holding provision 46, and it has 5 clauses. So in each clause, it describes what would be required and whose satisfaction it would be to. So in the first case, there's a relocation and conservation plan to the satisfaction of the city's heritage planner and director of planning. So we would take that through our normal heritage review process. When we were satisfied that that plan was acceptable and we had the measures, we could then say we're prepared to lift that holding provision. And same is true for the transportation impact study. The region has to be satisfied of the outcome. The functional servicing and detailed grading plan and stormwater to the region's satisfaction, as well as a detailed noise study. So once land use permissions are known, detailed design drawings are completed, including balconies and windows and door openings and air conditioning locations, and we can have a detailed noise assessment to ensure that any mitigating factors can be included in the detailed design. And then a record of site condition is the final, which is to the satisfaction of the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks. So currently our process is when we receive a written notice to say the intent of the holding provision has been met, we have the information that we needed, we can then write a report to council and have that holding provision removed by bylaw.
Thank you. And again, just to be clear, we are already in that 90-day window, correct, of when we have to deal with an application?
Through the mayor, that is correct. These are within the appeal period for non-decision.
Thank you.
Okay, those appear to be all the questions. Councillor Singh, if I can ask you to bring forward the recommendation that was deferred at Planning Committee.
Thank you. The application as presented and supported by staff, presented to the Planning Committee, and then referred to Council, and I move it forward.
So you're moving it and seconded by?
I'm sorry, seconded by my Vice Chair, who doesn't want to second it, so I'll look at Councillor Davey as a seconder, but I think he has an amendment in mind as well.
Okay, that's fine. Councillor Davey, you're next in the queue.
Yes, thank you. I have I guess three amendments that hopefully the clerk can bring up on screen. I'll just give everyone a second to review them. For those of you that can't see that at the back, the first one is that in lieu of the movement relocation of the existing homes at 544 and 546 Lancaster Street, the city accept the alternative community benefits as outlined in the developer's commitments during delegation with respect to park amenity, donation of the working center, displacement of residents, and affordable housing, and that is part of the holding provision pending regional review of traffic infrastructure, that an alternate entrance exit towards Riverbend Drive be explored. And the last one is just with respect to, I'll read it, but the proposed site-specific provision 367 be amended by removing, quote, this regulation shall only apply to buildings moved from 544 and 546 Lancaster Street West. In paragraph A, and further, that pursuant to section 34(7) of the Planning Act, as amended, further notice is not required to be given in respect to the zoning bylaw amendments. So that last part is really just with respect to not moving the heritage homes. I'm not sure if anyone wanted to comment on this, but I would like to speak to it last, if I could, Mr. Mayor.
That's fine. I'll come to you in a moment. Councillor Davey, is there a seconder for the amendment? Seconded by Councillor Michaud. I'll deal with we'll deal with the amendment first, and then the main motion. I just have one question, Mr. Stevenson, before we do that. The applicant did indicate that in terms of the heritage properties, they'd be willing to look at potentially incorporating some elements into their building. Is that something that would happen through the discussions through the site plan process? Or would that need to be amended in this amendment?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I would recommend a further amendment to holding provision 46, paragraph A, where it currently says a relocation and conservation plan. I would recommend we add or commemoration plan, and that would allow us to look at what architectural features or materials could be part of a commemoration, and that would be subject to the holding provision, and that way we would be able to report back to council on what work is being done.
Okay, Councillor Davey, are you prepared to include that as part of your amendment? Okay, so we'll take that. Councillor Michaud, are you okay with that being part of your second? Yes, thank you. Okay, so comments on the amendment and or the main motion. We'll deal with, from a comment perspective, we'll deal both with one. Sorry?
You've got my speaker on still.
Yeah, that's from before. Sorry.
Okay, so.
Okay, Councillor Deneau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to start by saying I don't love this development. I don't think it's a good location. There are environmental concerns. There are housing concerns. There are human element concerns. There are traffic concerns. I've seen, Mr. Litt, a lot of your properties. I believe they're really, really beautiful properties in perfect areas. Personally, I don't think this is a perfect area. My hope going forward is when developers want to build in our city, they don't just look for an empty parcel of land and that looks good, that they take into account all those factors that I just mentioned, environmental and Indigenous concerns as well. But municipalities, we're kind of stuck, right? Do we turn down the proposal and we lose everything that has been gained by having bargaining and going back and forth, or do we agree to it and we get what we've agreed to? And so, unfortunately, the province has made it apparent that they want homes built no matter what. Doesn't matter where, doesn't matter how, they want them built. And I don't think that's, I wish they didn't have that much strength in municipal decisions, but they do right now. And so I'm asking developers who may be watching or out in our guests, just look at the overall impact. I'm not saying they don't, but there are more impacts than just putting up a building and trying to meet the needs of what the province or what the city says is how many homes we need. There's bigger aspects than just those. And with that, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Deneau. Councillor Michaud, you're up next.
Thank you. And just on the heels of Councillor Deneau, this isn't my proudest moment here tonight. It's been one of the most difficult processes to go through. Listening to all the residents and how this is going to impact the area. Do I think it's a good fit for this area? Absolutely not. But the reality of it is we are stuck with Bill 23 and our hands are tied. And I would not, in good conscience, be able to vote against this with the risk of losing all the other pieces that would come along with this. The donation to the working center, the other things that you've given.
Excuse me. Sorry, Ms. Mohammed, please. Ms. Mohammed, please. Ms. Mohammed, please. Thank you. Okay, folks, delegations have had an opportunity. Now it's council's time to debate. Okay?
So with that said,
Councillor Michaud, please continue.
with that said, I look forward to the holding provision, and I'm hoping that something can be done with regards to the traffic concerns that that the residents have. I'm hoping that you, Mr. Litt, can, reach out to the other areas and see about different avenues of getting traffic in and out. In a perfect world, I'd like you to downsize this about half the size. And still it would complement the area, but that's unlikely it's going to happen. So I will be supporting this with, heavy heart.
Thank you, Councillor Michaud. Councillor Johnson.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And very similar to what my colleagues have said, it is with an extremely heavy heart that I will be supporting the staff recommendation this evening. It is not because I want to. It's because I too feel that my hand is being forced here by a government that is making us make decisions that are contrary to sometimes our own personal beliefs. And this is an evening where that is happening to me. And it is very upsetting. I spoke to residents there. I visited the property and it's beautiful. And I'm disappointed that this is the particular property that the application development is on. And that is why I asked the question earlier about, do we have to deal with each development application that comes in as it's set up? And that is exactly how we have to deal with things. And it's not because we want to, it is because our hand is forced here. And I don't want to lose the community benefits that have been put forward, and we've seen that happen before. And I can't do that with a clear conscience to our fiduciary responsibilities to this community vote in any other way, and other than to say that I'm sad about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, I come at this differently. As far as I'm concerned, our hands are not tied. In fact, we have to do here what's right, and we are the only ones in this world that can actually reject this proposal. Nobody else can do it. We can sit here and say we don't agree with the traffic problem, we don't agree with the environmental problem, and yet we're just going to keel over and accept it. Well, I won't accept it, and for those two reasons that I've just mentioned, but also because we do get a lot of developments around the city. This particular property was rezoned under the Crosby 2019, which allowed for an 8-story building. It's not a zoning bylaw from 1985 that we're working from. This is a current bylaw. This is not in an MTSA area. There's nothing about this proposal that fits the property that we're talking about here. We have a property that, while not heritage designated, it certainly has heritage cultural value, which should be protected, and that again is our obligation as council to do. There's concerns about the displacement of residents, and clearly people are not satisfied with what's being offered to replace the housing arrangements that they're currently living in. And it's not just about the 4 walls, it's about more than that. And the site has been referred to by the residents that lived there as a sustainable community, and which is a huge loss. The other thing is, which I have to go back to again, is this line in the report that refers to 5 high-rises seen from the river as something that creates a visual interest, and that just is beyond my understanding of what 5 buildings would be, and certainly from a natural environment, and that being the Grand River. So I will not support this, and I think, we should not be afraid of what the OLT could bring. Even if we lost the community benefits that are being offered here, there's far more that people are going to lose than that, and by that I mean the people that are living in that community right now. So I hope you will consider that.
Okay, Councillor Davey, then I'll make my comments. Unless
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just processing. So planning's always been my least favorite part of this job, and it's getting worse, I'm not going to lie. Because our actual authority has been decreasing significantly over the years. Saying no to this, and I've seen it happen. I've seen where, politicians will say no to something they know is going to happen anyway to get pats in the back from the community. But the reality is, if we say no to this, you know what happens? The exact same thing. The exact same thing will happen. It's just a matter of time, and we will not have the insured people that are displaced having an option. We will not have a considerable donation to the working center, which helps those of us that need it the most. We will not have the amenities probably to the local park. We were once seen as, not too long ago, we were more seen as a yield sign or even a stop sign when it comes to development. City Council is not that anymore. City Council is a speed bump to development at best. The best we can do is fine tune and try and make it the best possible development that we can get. You may not like that, but that is the reality. The only reason I would consider voting against this is because the actual real true issue here is the traffic. And I can't vote against this because of the traffic, because it hasn't been dealt with yet. So as a result of the holding provision, when that comes back, and I'm telling you now, cycling lanes is not going to solve this problem. But we're not voting in favor of it now because the traffic has been solved. We're voting in favor of it precisely because the traffic has not been solved. So the fact that someone could vote against this kind of blows my mind, because I'm going to tell you a story of something that happened just very recently. There's a development at the corner of Park and Victoria that was proposed. Council said, oh, as a matter of fact, specific members of council said, don't be afraid of the OLT. I'm not afraid of the OLT. What happened was that they appealed to the OLT, and guess what's happening? The exact same development is happening, minus $1.25 million that was supposed to go to affordable housing. People will be homeless because of that decision.
Councillor Schneider.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to thank Councillor Davey. It's a tough position to be in, to be the ward councillor here, and I just want to assure the residents that Councillor Davey has worked hard with the developer to get the benefits that are being offered tonight. He is correct. If this goes to the OLT, and it's not done out of spite, the developers don't take the benefits away out of spite. It's reality, it's a time, and it's a cost thing that happens. I'm kind of lost for words right now, but I really appreciate my fellow councillor Davey and the hard work he's put into this and the incredibly tough position that he is in this decision-making process.
Councillor Chapman, you've already spoken.
Comment. No, I'd like to make one comment, please. What Councillor Davey has said is not the full story, and that's all I can say, but it is not the full story of how that development at Park and Victoria played out. So that's all I'll say, and I insist that we should not be afraid of the OLT, any of us, staff or council.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Chapman. I did try to give you a little bit of latitude there. There's no. First of all, I want to begin by thanking everyone who's been engaged over many months in the process around this project, and as many of my colleagues have indicated, planning has become increasingly challenging, certainly in my time around this horseshoe, in terms of the role that City Council can play versus the mandates that have been directed to us by respective provincial governments. I think it's important for folks to keep in mind is that when it comes to considering development applications, Council really has three main things to consider. Well, actually, I'll say four. The first three are the primary consideration by our professional planning staff, who have to look at the application and say, does this application meet provincial legislation as is identified in the Planning Act or other pieces of provincial legislation? Secondly, does it meet provincial regulations that exist with respect to planning applications? And thirdly, how does it meet the municipal planning documents in place with respect to the official plan, the zoning bylaw, and so on? And staff's professional responsibility is to consider those things and make a professional recommendation as planners to City Council, and by virtue of making that recommendation to the community with respect to that application. In this particular instance, what we've heard is that this application is in keeping with those principles. There are some issues and concerns that need to still be addressed. One of the significant ones, as Councillor Davey indicated, has been the traffic concerns that exist in that area and the holding provision that is required. I think it will be extremely important in the region's consideration of that holding provision to ensure that the traffic concerns are being addressed. both in terms of the impact that this project will have, as well as, the future changes in redevelopment that may happen along the Lancaster Street corridor in the fullness of time. And so while I too am not thrilled with this application, to be frank, I also feel that we are obligated to consider all of the information before us, and in doing so, I too will be supporting the recommendation that's before us. So I'll deal with the amendment first, and then I'll deal with the main motion as amended. So those in favor of the amendment? Any opposed? That amendment is carried. Those in favor of the main motion as amended? Sure. Recorded vote has been requested. So this is the main motion as amended. And that is carried. So thank you, everyone, for your engagement and involvement in this process. The motion has been approved with the changes that have been outlined, and I think at this point we probably should take a 5-minute bio break before we continue on with the rest of the agenda. Thank you. Okay, council, we should probably get going. I anticipate we're likely going to go a few minutes past 11, so I'm going to just be preemptive and I'll need a motion to go past 11. Moved by Councillor Singh, seconded by Councillor Davey. All those in favour? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. We'll now move on to delegation requests that we have related to the Ruse Island encampment residents. And I do want to note that as part of our procedural bylaw, I want to advise that Council is appreciative of the willingness for residents to engage in the public process. There are 5 delegations who are in attendance this day to speak to homelessness in Kitchener, specifically related to the Ruse Island encampment. To permit the delegations to address Council, a motion would be required as the matter is not an item listed on the agenda. Assuming that Council does grant the delegations the opportunity to speak, as per the procedural bylaw, members of Council will be actively listening, but are not permitted to make any comments or ask any questions related to the presentation. Delegations will be encouraged to share any comments in a succinct way and specific to matters within the City's jurisdiction, and to refrain from speaking to any matters that would be subject to the authority of other jurisdictions, such as the Region of Waterloo or Waterloo Regional Police Services. So with that, I'll take a motion to hear the delegations. Moved by Councillor Davey, seconded by Councillor Singh. All those in favour? Opposed? That is carried. So I do want to remind the delegations that they have 5 minutes to make their presentations. Councillor Michaud, you're keyed in. Is that accidental from before? Okay, thank you. Our first delegation is Mr. David Alton. Welcome, Mr. Alton.
Hi. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to you directly on behalf of the Social Development Centre of Waterloo Region. As you have seen, the Social Development Centre and the Community Legal Services have raised concerns about human rights violations stemming from the recent decisions on Ruse Island and Willow River Park. Those concerns are serious, and we hope you are holding them and the people impacted by them closely in your hearts as we try and direct a path forward. We are here tonight to provide you with some more tools to help us all move forward from this current state of concern to one of collaboration, transformation, and restoration. Firstly, we want to share some hope. We are very optimistic that such collaboration, transformation, and restoration is on the horizon. What fuels this hope is the strong foundation of the Housing for All strategy that endorses the principles of a human rights approach and has launched amazing pilot projects such as the Lived Expertise Working Group and the Shifts Solutions Lab, which starts shortly. Since creating the Housing for All strategy, we have seen city staff move towards a human rights approach and away from traditional postures of criminalization and evictions. We want to commend the city for that work and the direction we were on prior to these decisions. We were a leader in Canada, and that other cities are still looking to for guidance. That foundation makes the actions on April 26th and 27th feel like a train that has jumped the tracks. It is bumpy and messy right now, but the track is right there, and we have the tools to get back on it. The human rights approach is those tools. It provides clear guidance on how to respond to situations like this. Council should be censoring it in your decision-making and leveraging it in your guidance towards and direction towards staff. As outlined in the national protocol, the human rights approach states that the city should recognize that the residents of encampments are rights holders, ensure meaningful engagement and effective participation with encampment residents, to prohibit all forced evictions, to explore all viable alternatives to evictions, to ensure that any reallocation, such as what was attempted on April 26th, is compliant with human rights, to ensure that encampments meet the basic needs of residents consistent with the human rights, to set housing as a right as the outcome we are all working towards, and to respect, protect, and fulfill the distinct rights of Indigenous peoples. The recent decisions did not meet that standard. However, with the help of community partners, it is quite possible to meet this standard moving forward. If you have questions about the applications of this approach, please reach out to partners like us. The Lived Expertise Working Group, for example, has created a rubric that breaks down the tangible steps that bylaw officers can take to be more in line with a human rights approach. Committing to that human rights approach means holding these principles alongside the pressures that fueled the April 26 decisions. The city's risk management framework is incomplete without a human rights lens. Human rights are inalienable and need to be weighted accordingly in decision-making alongside the pressures that you are experiencing. This is where advocates have an important role to help unearth blind spots and mitigate potential harms as we make this shift. At the Social Development Center, we have a mandate to amplify the voices coming from those in encampments. And there are many grassroots advocacy groups who play an important role in highlighting harms that encampment residents are experiencing, highlighting gaps in support, and highlighting areas where change is needed. There are also many community members who have been signing petitions, sending emails, and attending community events because they too believe that a better path is possible. As an advocacy organization, we understand that the city has unique limitations and pressures that grassroots groups do not. We believe that advocacy can act as a bridge, where through collaboration, we collectively wade through this messiness of this work. Lastly, we want to leave with a call to restoration. Since the actions on the 26th, new ways of moving forward are still emerging. Regional staff picked up the phone and are now coming to the collaboration table to start engaging with the human rights approach. And we have seen that bylaw officers have been listening to community advocates and adjusted approaches at several key moments in the past year. I was talking with them this weekend about our goal at SDC to be providing officers with the tools and training to move a step closer to a human rights approach.
Mr. Alton, if you can wrap up, please.
Yes. This is fertile ground all around us to get back on track and resume the process of collaboration, transformation, and restoration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Shannon Down. Welcome, Ms. Down.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Urbanovic and members of council. First of all, thank you for permitting our delegations tonight. I'm here to speak about the issue of tent encampments. By way of introduction, my name is Shannon Down. I'm the Executive Director of Waterloo Region Community Legal Services. We are a local community legal aid clinic funded by Legal Aid Ontario, and we provide services to low-income residents across Waterloo Region. We focus on areas of law such as housing and homelessness, social assistance, human rights, employment, and immigration. We also have a mandate to address systemic issues related to poverty by taking on test cases, community development and organizing, and advocating for changes to laws and policies that either reinforce or perpetuate poverty and inequality. Recently, our clinic represented a number of individuals experiencing homelessness who were living in tents at the encampment at Victoria and Weber in the regional municipality of Waterloo, and persons unknown and to be ascertained court application. We successfully argued that charter rights, specifically Section 7, would be engaged by a proposed eviction. We would like to recognize that there is a lot of positive work being done to address the issue of homelessness by the City of Kitchener. And in particular, we recognize the excellent work that was done to produce the Housing for All strategy, which is subtitled A Blueprint for a More Caring Community. This strategy, developed by the City with input and assistance from a number of groups and members of the public, outlines a compassionate and human rights-based roadmap for addressing homelessness and the need for more affordable housing in the City of Kitchener. Priority 1 in the strategy is to apply a human rights-based approach to housing, and it speaks to the right to adequate housing as a foundational and fundamental human right. Priority 2 is a commitment to lived experience collaboration, which focuses on the need to consult with people with lived experience and ensure meaningful participation in the design, implementation, and monitoring of housing policies and decisions. Policy 3 is help end homelessness, which includes advocating to the region to address encampments, incorporating a human rights-based approach. These are thoughtful and compassionate priorities, but a strategy is only as good as its implementation and its application to real-world scenarios. The recent developments at Roos Island, where fences and gates have been put up, security staff are posted around the clock, and community supporters and lived experience advocates are being subjected to policing and criminal charges. Those actions are not aligned with the priorities in the Housing for All strategy. The city has posted on its website that there is a no new tents in Victoria Park policy going forward. And I asked the mayor and council, how does this policy align with priorities 1, 2, and 3 of the Housing for All strategy? The policy for no new tents does nothing to solve the issue of homeless encampments. It just makes the issue less publicly visible. We know that the demand for housing and shelter remains very high, and that's despite new projects like the Herbs Road Hybrid Shelter or the House of Friendship Shelter Care site on Weber Street. In our work at the clinic, we see a steady stream of rent evictions and evictions for a variety of reasons, which leaves our clients who are experiencing these evictions often with no option but to pitch a tent. There is 0% vacancy in affordable rental options, according to the CMHC, and an over 7,000 household wait list for community housing, as I stated in the letter that I sent to Mayor and Council last week. I know this issue is difficult to manage, and that upper levels of government have not provided municipalities with adequate resources to address this growing crisis. But I ask the city to stay true to the goals of the Housing for All strategy, namely a compassionate, humane, human rights-based approach to the issues of homelessness and encampments in all actions, decisions, and policies of the city going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Down. Our next delegation joining our next delegation joining in person is Mr. Julian Nickham. Welcome, Mr. Nickham.
Distinguished councillors, I speak today on behalf of the Island Ryan People's Community Defense Brigade. We were created in 1998 and changed our name several times with the goal of creating a youth-run youth drop-in center. Carl Zaire said it was impossible. We showed him he was wrong. From 2002 to 2003, we ran our drop-in center where we provided free food, literacy programs, university courses from professors for UFW without 1 penny from the city. We have also done tent cities, fighting for housing, all sorts of different activism, and that's not what I'm here to talk about. I am here today to put forward several questions with the hope that these questions will enlighten the people of the city and show things how they are, not how we wish them to be. Over a year, people have been camping in so-called Victoria Park under the watchful eye of city security, private agency, and police. This went on through the winter, demonstrating that this is not some sort of attention-seeking protest, but rather a life-and-death struggle. I want to emphasize that because many people like to dismiss our work and impact when we have been supporting and building community for decades. Over this past year, we proposed to the city that, like they did during the COVID crisis, hotel rooms be made available to the people of Roos Island. I would like some accountability on why the city has not treated the public health crisis of homelessness and the opioid epidemic the same as COVID-19. And just a quick thing I'd like to say, this month, I counted there were 50 people here in this room. This month, I lost 50 people that I know, that I work with closely, 5 of them that were in our central committee. We sat across the table. I would like some accountability on why the city and region have not treated the public health crisis of homelessness and the opioid epidemic the same as COVID-19. We sat across the table again and again, pointing out the deaths as a result of the decision to not provide motel housing to the unsheltered population as they wait for supportive housing. We would meet with Bylaw regularly to discuss ways to better meet the needs of the residents of Roos Island, which included myself. We talked about how this public health crisis could simply be solved by housing people like they did during the COVID crisis. Are the lives of the poor not as valuable as those affected by COVID? I am poor and marginally housed, and I was also a victim of COVID on a respirator in a coma. Both of these crises was caused by a system being negligent to the most marginalized. We question why the city waited till after this winter to respond differently. Many of our friends and neighbors struggled this winter. People died of the cold. There was a syphilis epidemic because people needed to sell their bodies for access to a warm place. Now that it is warm, people are seeking safer options. However, the city has chosen to fence up Roos Island, evict tenants from downtown, and now I have ironically been arrested for speaking up and for organizing for safer housing options for people. When the city shut down the island, I lost access to my hepatitis C medication and my heart medication, among other things I need to survive. To me, this is life and death. 2 weeks earlier, we were assured by Gloria from Bylaw that the closing of the Jubilee Bridge had nothing to do with Tent City. We took her at her word and were shocked and hurt to see when the island was closed down. We were trying to organize this weekend's 24-hour public education day when we were arrested. Was this a coincidence or an attempt to stop us from collaborating in a community? A member of Landback was arrested. All she did was back up my right to have access to my medication. Who made the decision to treat a land defender as a criminal for trying to help someone they never met survive and get the med they needed? The time for words like lived experience, unsheltered people, and those words you use to make yourselves feel good is over. Action must be taken. We would like you to meet us and our communities in our spaces so we can solve these problems.
Thank you, Mr. Ickham. Our next delegation is joining virtually, and it's Ms. Lynn Kashubeck.
Hi.
Welcome, Ms. Kashubeck.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and the Kitchener Council. My name is Lynn Kashubeck, as you heard. I am the manager of volunteers and peer engagement at AQUA, which is the AIDS Committee of Cambridge, Kitchener, Waterloo, and area. AQUA provides multiple healthcare clinics and community and social supports to individuals who are from key populations at heightened risk to HIV, Hep C, and related healthcare challenges, and are also made vulnerable by poverty, homelessness, and drug poisoning via the opioid overdose epidemic. We engage with 5,000 unique individuals a year in over 20,000 interactions. Many of these individuals are from communities that have been made vulnerable to poor health by policy decisions that devalue accessibility and well-funded health care, underfunded community supports and social services, and other policy decisions that have made affordable housing a rarity. These policies have created a homelessness crisis, and I'm here today to ask Council to honor and respect the human rights, autonomy, and freedom of movement from the small number of encampment residents remaining at the encampment at Roos Island in Victoria Park. A widespread police bylaw and security guard presence, coupled with placing fencing around these residents' homes, is not only intimidating, but dehumanizing to individuals who are subjected to isolation and hostility, while also being blamed for the inequality and injustices they regularly experience. Housing is a social determinant of health. There is a severe shortage of affordable housing in our community and across the province. Individuals who are capable of working full-time are struggling to afford housing. Lastly, there is a larger number of individuals experiencing homelessness in our community than the total number of appropriate shelter spaces and sanctioned encampment spaces available to meet their emergency shelter needs. Having police, bylaw, and security staff break up encampments and fragment homeless communities is also very dangerous. Doing so isolates individuals experiencing homelessness and separating them from the trusted and chosen people, the resources, and the naloxone that keep them safe, and exposing them to potential injury or death. An enforcement response to this social issue works at cross purposes with the goals of community, social and health services, and supporting individuals who are homeless. The enforcement response interferes with humanitarian and social justice focused responses and impedes progress made by community workers who struggle to stay in contact with individuals who are intentionally being displaced within the communities that they belong to. At Aqua, we strongly believe in walking alongside while supporting those with lived experiences of marginalization. And as the manager of a long-standing volunteer and peer program, I know that choice and autonomy are essential while providing support to individuals who are waiting for shelter and housing that unfortunately does not yet exist. We ask that you consult with the expert community members living in Kitchener encampments about workable solutions in this crisis. Provide them with a sanctioned encampment location in Kitchener to improve their stability, safety, and well-being, and advocate for urgent rent control, eviction moratorium, and Ontario Works and Ontario Disability Support Plan to address the severe increase in homelessness happening in our city. And as a resident of Kitchener, I've been a resident for 66 years, and I want to share on a personal level, not from Aqua, but the folks that are in the decision-making positions, I do not see that they rely on expertise of the various players before moving ahead on projects that concern marginalized populations, leading projects that you don't understand when there are agencies that do know what needs to be done, and in the manner where there will be less harm on the folks that we're trying to support. That also requires finding an agency that does work without causing harm.
Thank you. Ms. Kasherbek, if I can ask you to wrap up, please.
Yes. As a resident for this long, born and raised, it was a very dark day for me when I saw the compound erected around Roos Island. There was no reasoning for this in any circumstance, and it's shameful. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kasherbek. And our final delegation this evening is Milo Hansen, who's joining virtually as well, I believe.
Thank you.
Well, welcome, Marlo.
Thank you. I'm here tonight as an ally to Osigani Nagaje Land Back Camp. I'm here as an ally to the unsheltered communities here in KW. But I'm here most importantly as a local community member standing in opposition to the punitive decisions regarding Moose Island encampment and in solidarity with those experiencing shelter instability. Today I want to read out a statement. So on behalf of Land Back Camp, it is unfortunate that co-founders and members of Land Back Camp cannot attend these council meetings either in person or online, given the violence perpetuated in these spaces towards FNMI and Two-Spirit community members. As local, urban Indigenous peoples, we find it important that the cities and region acknowledge the stolen lands operated on in colonial systems and then subsequently continue to criminalize and punish those experiencing homelessness, those who seek to support them, and First Nations people. It is extremely hypocritical of corporations to speak of reconciliation and yet ignore the very fact of land theft and over-policing of marginalized, oppressed community members. A Land Back Camp youth was arrested trying to support some of the thousands who are unsheltered in this region, many of whom are also Indigenous. Our connections to the land and to each other is being criminalized and goes against every TRC call to action, Supreme Court decisions such as the Sundown 1999 case, which allows for structures to be erected when cultural practices or traditions are carried out, and numerous articles within UNDRIP, particularly Article 10, which states Indigenous people cannot be forcibly removed from their lands or territories. In addition, this youth's undertaking states that they are banned from Willow River Park, the very same park that a permanent Indigenous fire space is now being created by the City of Kitchener. Further, the banning during the month of June, which is National Indigenous Peoples Month as well as Pride, means that there has now been a cut of ceremonial, cultural, spiritual, familial, and emotional ties for the Indigequeer youth to the very lands we called home during the summer of 2020 and once called home prior to colonization. The City of Kitchener has no business celebrating Indigenous Peoples Month and Pride Month if the definition of reconciliation is arresting a queer Indigenous youth and banning them from sacred gathering places within the park. We urge you to drop the charges and place resources towards affordable housing and applying the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's 94 calls to action. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Milo, for coming in this evening and sharing your thoughts with us. Thank you to all 5 delegations who presented this evening, and council and staff will consider the breadth of your comments. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on then to item number 7, reports of committees. Planning and Strategic Initiatives Committee, Councillor Singh. If you can bring in the balance of the report, but actually before you do that, can I ask you to deal with 7.3.A separately, and if I can ask Councillor Davey, who is acting mayor, to chair that portion of the meeting. Councillor Davey, if you can click in.
Yep, and I guess it would still go to Councillor Singh to bring that forward.
Yes. Yeah, as received from the Planning and Strategic Initiatives Committee, we have dealt with 7.1A for Lancaster and then 7.1B. And you said you would like...
Yeah, just 7.3B, correct, Mr. Mayor? That's
7.3A pertaining to 1157, 1175 Weaver Street.
Yes,
East.
sorry.
Oh, I see. Okay, let's take a care of 7.1B first.
No, I've taken over the chair, so we're going to do 7.3 because the mayor...
Oh, you want to take care of that first? Okay, I missed that part. I thought he was saying when we get to that, and then you want to switch.
Yep.
All right, Mr. Acting Mayor.
So been moved by yourself and...
Yeah, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Chapman.
Okay, and are there any questions on this item? Not seeing any comments? No? Those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. I resolve the chair back to you, Mr.
Thank you, Councillor Singh. If you can bring in the balance of the report now.
All right, the balance of the report as received from the Planning and Strategic Initiatives Committee for May 8th.
And seconded by Councillor Chapman.
Yeah.
Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Moving on then to Community and Infrastructure Services Committee from May the 15th. Councillor Johnson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It has been moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Dave Schneider that the report of the Community and Infrastructure Services Committee dated May 15th, 2023, listed as items 7.2.a to 7.2.c on the agenda this date be adopted.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And I just realized. So, Madam Clerk, which one do we still have left? Or we did all the rest of planning? Okay, so both the May 8th and the May 15th. Okay, perfect. Thank you. So we'll move on then to, just wanted to make sure we didn't miss anything in the process. Any unfinished business? Staff have, who's staff 3? Oh, yes.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, if I could just draw your attention, at the Planning and Strategic Initiatives Committee meeting, staff were directed to bring back a revised bylaw to require non-residential uses on the ground floor at King and Montgomery. I had sent a revised email indicating there was item 7.3A, but it's actually 7.3B. I don't know if Council wants to consider that revised bylaw or is satisfied with the way that it was laid out in the report as 100% residential.
I think we did want to consider the revised one. So I think the planning report is fine the way it is. It's just when we get to the bylaws that we need the revised one, correct?
That's correct, yes. There's a revised bylaw that was sent by email today.
Okay, so when the clerk brings the bylaws forward, that's the one that we'll be considering. So with that, we'll move on to, there's no unfinished business. Any new business? Councillor Chapman.
I just wanted to ask a question about 7.3.b. In the diagram that we received, it showed the commercial spaces on the Weber Street side of the building. Is the opposite side of the building right on King Street? Like what will it actually look like from King Street? And I notice there is no commercial. There are no commercial sites there.
Mr. Stevenson?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the property is an L-shaped property with only the small amenity space facing King Street. There is another property at the corner of King and Montgomery. So the only street lines that are facing a public street in this case are Montgomery as well as Weber Street. So the recommendation is to have commercial facing those public streets.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Michaud.
I just have a question with, did this plan, did the look of this whole thing change? Because we talked about the view of this whole development, how it was going to be like the entryway to the city. And I'm just wondering, is it retail we're going to see as you come in the city or not? Like we're not going to see that piece of it. I looked at it today and I was kind of confused whether how much it's changed or is it what it was?
Mr. Stevenson?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. So the building is in the same form. The ground floor ceiling heights have increased to 4.5 meters in height, and that's to support commercial.
Right.
The zoning that's revised would restrict residential uses along Montgomery and along Weber Street. So therefore, the appearance of the ground floor for a pedestrian would be of a commercial use.
Great.
With residential above.
Good. Thank you.
And I think, Councillor Michaud, for the other part, I think, of your question, which is sort of how it interfaces with the entryway into the city, that's something that, and Mr. Stevenson can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's something that will be dealt with through the site plan approval process, and he's nodding. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, so back to new business. Any new business? Any regional council update? Don't have anything new there. Questions and answers. Questions and answers. We have lots of questions, it seems. Councillor Johnson.
Well, mine was actually around a regional update. Sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So I just wanted to let people know that, and thank you to Mayor Verbanovic for advocating to Regional Council with regards to the cancellation of Route 2 through Forest Hill, through Forest Heights. And that there are 2 planned information sessions on Monday, June 5th. There's a virtual one And on Wednesday, June 14th, there's a drop-in session between 6:30 and 8:30 at the Forest Heights Community Center with regional staff and I assume regional councillors in attendance there to be able to answer questions around that. Thank you for your advocacy on that. I'm very happy to see that public information meetings have been scheduled, and I look forward to Ward 8 people having the opportunity to have their say at those. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Councillor Johnson, Councillor Clancy.
I have a question for staff. Recently, I've received a lot of advocacy around the severing of agricultural lands, which is a new bill from the province. And I just wanted to ask, have staff had a chance, I know it's quite new, but had a chance to explore the impact this will have on our agricultural sector? Can you speak to that?
Mr. Stevenson?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So as the planning heads for all of the urban and rurals within the region have been discussing the proposed provincial policy statement. Staff are reviewing that and will be providing comments as part of the ERO posting. We, along with our other colleagues within the region, will be providing comments that we believe that growth should be directed within urban and rural settlement areas. We do have some questions about the as-of-right severances for agricultural lands. We think that serviced rural settlement areas are a more appropriate location for growth.
Thank you. And can you share that with us? Kind of, or are we allowed to have any input? Or is, yeah, I'm not sure how the process is going to unfold. I know it's a short timeline now.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. We'll take the same approach we did with Bill 23, and we'll provide Council with our full comprehensive set of comments that we submit on the ERO posting. So you'll have all of our comments on all the aspects of the proposed amendments to the bill.
Thank you. The two concerns I have are how agricultural lands are now being unaffordable, so it impacts our ability to have food security in the area. I've talked to elderly farmers who say that the succession planning, like kids can't get into that, as well as like the price of the infrastructure to service these. The second thing I wanted to raise was my intention. I'm going to submit a notice of motion for a cooling bylaw. In Vancouver, 600 people passed away because of extreme heat, and we know that this is an impact of climate change in our region that we'll see more of in the coming years. I met with a senior who had to eat at a food bank to afford an air conditioner and said that many of his neighbors in the Kiwanis building on Weber aren't able to afford an air conditioner. So this is a seniors low-income apartment building where I'm worried about the health impacts of extreme heat. Thank you. I've been in discussion with Gloria, and we're working on how to make it most appropriate as a first step.
Okay, well, I would encourage you to continue working with staff so that anything that ultimately comes before council would have the benefit of some perspective from staff first. Councillor Michaud.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A number of months ago, I brought forward to council that the region had taken the garbage cans away from the GRT shelters. And I believe shortly after that, after around the region budget, I think there was word that they were going to put them back. Now, I'm not noticing them in my ward. There doesn't seem to be any in the GRT shelters. I'm wondering if any other councillors have noticed that, and I'd like to pass that message along to Mr. Mayor, that maybe we could find out from the region why those garbage cans aren't back there.
I can thank you for raising that. I wasn't aware that they haven't been put back in place, and I'll follow up and share whatever information we get from the region with you by email. Any other questions and answers? If not, move to the bylaws. And before we deal with first and second reading of the bylaws, Madam Clerk, I'm going to go to Councillor Davey to deal with the bylaw pertaining to No. Sorry. Yeah, dealing with my conflict one. Go ahead. Councillor Davey.
Right, and that one's not listed here, so I presume it would be Councillor Singh that brings it forward?
Would you like them introduced as a whole? There's several of them.
So just do the one that I have a conflict
That's
on,
no
and then
problem.
we'll deal with the rest.
There are 2 additional bylaws related to Planning and Strategic Initiative Report 7.3A for 1157 and 1175 Weaver Street.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor has declared.
Yeah, just on that one, can I get a mover? Moved by Councillor Johnson, seconded by Councillor Deneau. Those in favor? Or sorry, any discussion? I think we already had it. Okay, those in favor? And are any opposed? None are opposed. That's carried. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, if I can ask for any additional extra bylaws over and above what's listed?
There are some additional, yeah. 3 additional bylaws related to Planning and Strategic Initiative Report 7.1A for 528 and 550 Lancaster Street West and 26 Bridge Street West as amended today. 1 additional bylaw related to Planning Strategic Initiative 7.1B related to 67 and 71 Nelson Avenue, as well as 2 additional bylaws related to Planning and Strategic Initiatives Report 7.3B for 1770 King Street East and 815 to 825 Weber Street East as amended this date as well.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Singh, seconded by Councillor Clancy. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. We'll move into motion to move into Committee of the Whole, moved by Councillor Schneider. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Councillor Schneider, over to you.
All right. I will ask the clerk if there are anything arising out of caucus earlier this day.
The motion is available for you on the screen.
Okay. Do I have a mover for these recommendations? Councillor Davey? All those in favor? Any opposed? 1 opposed? And the motions and recommendations are carried. Oh, sorry. Change of vote there. So, Councillor Chapman is in favor. All right, and it was dealt with under delegations, the strategic plan for Kitchener, Compass Kitchener report card.
Move for the committee to rise and report.
All those in favor? And that is carried.
So it's been moved by Councillor Clancy and seconded by Councillor Michaud that the proceedings in the recorded pecuniary interest and conflicts taken in the meeting of the Committee of the Whole held this date as attached here to and forming part of these minutes be the same are hereby adopted and confirmed. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. We've got 3rd reading of the bylaws. Do I need to deal with? Yep. So Councillor Davey, back over to you.
Thank you. The bylaw related to 7.3A. Can I get a mover? By Councillor Singh, seconder, Councillor Michaud. Those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. That carries. Thank you.
And now I'll take a mover for the balance of the 3rd reading of bylaws. Moved by Councillor Johnson, seconded by Councillor Schneider. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And before we adjourn Council, I think many of you have heard that one of our own residents who grew up here and played basketball for many years at one of our community centers at Stanley Park is a member of the Denver Nuggets, and his team has been incredibly successful. And as of this evening, will now be playing the Miami Heat in the NBA Finals, beginning on Thursday evening at 8:30. Our staff have been working with a number of community partners, as well as the NBA and the Denver Nuggets organization, to plan some community viewing celebrations for the NBA Finals. The first 2 of those will be happening downtown, starting this Thursday evening at at 7 o'clock with live music and 8:30 for the game. Other details will follow in a press release sometime tomorrow. But we'll also be lighting the square in Nuggets colors, and it should be a fun thing, and it would be great to see certainly it's generating lots of interest in our fair city by basketball media all over the place, and it'll generate even more after they're successful in winning the finals, and we have a Kitchener kid who's been part of that success story. So stay tuned, watch for the media release, but hopefully members of council will be able to come down on Thursday evening. And so with that, I will take a motion to adjourn, moved by Councillor Deneau and seconded by Councillor O'Dooney. All those in favour? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you very much, everyone.